From a single base camp at 5,150 meters, climbers head out for two different mountains, one to the right, one to the left. Almost the same height, the same glacier, the same weather. And yet the odds of getting home differ by almost a factor of 5. There is no other place like this anywhere on the planet. On the 28th of July, 2000, two brothers climb the one that's considered the safest summit of all 14 8,000ers in the world. It's their 12th mountain climb together, a record nobody had set before them. Only one of them will come back down. Here's what happened on the descent from Gasherbrum 2, and why the gentlest 8,000er turned out to be more dangerous than its deadly neighbor. Aretsabaleta doesn't look like a place where Himalayan records are born, a small industrial town in the Basque province of Gipuzkoa, wedged between green hills. No glaciers, no big walls, no high-altitude climbing school anywhere nearby. What it does have is a mountain club called Murakikso, the same as in 100 neighboring towns. People head into the hills at the weekends simply because that's what you do here. Felix Inurrategi grows up in exactly this world. As a young man, what grabs him isn't height, it's words. He gets into Bertsolaritza, the Basque art of improvised verse, where you compose a stanza right there on stage and sing it to the room with no preparation at all. That craft demands a cool head under other people's eyes, and the ability not to lose the thread when a pause drags on too long. A few years later, those same qualities will come in handy somewhere else entirely. Felix comes to the mountains through the club. His younger brother Alberto follows, born on the 3rd of November, 1968. There isn't much age between them, and very soon they stop being just two lads from the same family on a list of club members. They become a rope team, not two people who sometimes climb together, but a permanent pair, a rare arrangement, and one they'll keep for the next 15 years. Nothing in this picture points towards the Himalaya. Basque mountaineering in those years has no big money, no industry, no sponsorship deals. It has club buses, homemade gear, and the habit of doing things under your own steam. Out of that amateur world, the 80s produce a generation that 10 years later will take half the list of the highest peaks on the planet. The Inurrategi brothers come from it. The end of the 80s, and the brothers' geography expands fast. First the Alps, where everyone learns who wants more than weekends in the hills back home. Then Yosemite, the granite walls of California, where what matters isn't stamina anymore but pure climbing technique. Two very different schools, and Felix and Alberto go through both. More important than where they climb is how they do it. They use no guides, no big team with clearly divided roles, where one man makes the decisions and the rest carry the loads. There are two of them, and everything that happens on the route, they decide between themselves. Out of that grows a principle they will never change. The fewest people, the least gear, the most self-reliance. In the Himalaya, people first start talking about them after Pumori. It's a 7,000er at the foot of Everest that many climbers use as a trial run before the big mountains. The brothers climb it and confirm that their method works on more than alpine walls. Their rope team deserves a story of its own. In high-altitude climbing, lineups are fluid. Every season a new expedition, new people, a new partner. A permanent pair that climbs year after year with the same two names is a rarity. Felix and Alberto have no leader and no follower, no senior and no junior. There are two equals who know each other better than any mountain on their list. That inseparability becomes their signature, and one day it will also be the thing that has to be lost. September 1991, Nepal. The brothers stand on the summit of Makalu, 8,485 meters. The fifth highest mountain on Earth. It's their first 8,000er, and it sets the bar straight away. Makalu is not one of the easy ones, and it's usually taken not first, but after a couple of gentler peaks. A year later, they choose Everest, and they do it their own way. The classic route, but with no bottled oxygen. No climber from Spain had reached the highest point on Earth like that before them. September 1992, both of them on top. Alberto is 23 at the time, and at that moment he becomes the youngest person ever to climb Everest without oxygen. The bill arrives immediately. The brothers come back from Everest with frostbite. An oxygen cylinder up high isn't a luxury. It's a heater working from the inside. It holds your body temperature and protects your fingers far better than any pair of mitts. By turning it down, they turn down that protection too. This isn't a gesture for the headlines. Refusing oxygen is part of the same logic as refusing guides. A mountain is climbed by a person's own strength, or it isn't climbed at all. They will never break that principle, not once in their entire career. After Everest, the two lads from Inurrategi start getting noticed far beyond the Basque country. Invitations appear, press interest, talk of the full list of 14. The brothers answer with pace, 1, sometimes 2, 8,000-meter mountains a year, with no breaks and no loud announcements. Pakistan, June 1994. The second highest mountain in the world doesn't let people in every season, and the queue of hopefuls is always longer than the list of those who make it. The brothers go up K2, not by the Abruzzi Spur, the most traveled line on the mountain, but by the season route on the south-southeast ridge. The choice says more about them than the ascent itself. Where they could follow a beaten track, they pick the harder, cleaner line. After that, the counter moves quickly. September 1995, Cho Oyu and Lhotse, two 8,000-meter summits in a single season. May 1996, Kangchenjunga, the third highest mountain on the planet. October of the same year, Shishapangma. In 4 seasons, the brothers' list doubles. From the outside, it looks like a conveyor belt, but on the inside, it's arranged the other way round. They barely use high-altitude porters. They barely fix any rope, the kind everybody else then climbs on. No oxygen. There's no crowd at their base camp. A brothers' expedition is a small team, and on the route itself, it's usually just the two of them. That approach costs more in strength and carries more risk and timing, but it gives them the thing they started for. They climb the mountain themselves, instead of the logistics climbing it around them. In climbing circles, their style is called clean, and that's a professional assessment, not a polite compliment. By the end of the 90s, Felix and Alberto are no longer the young lads from the Murukikso club, but a rope team watched by everyone who follows altitude. And almost nobody, looking at their list, asks the question that will later turn out to be the main one. What happens if one of the two is gone? The summer of 1997 shows the other side of the method. The brothers arrive at Broad Peak to try a new line, a route nobody had climbed before them. Attempts like that are the real work of a top-class mountaineer. Plenty of people can repeat somebody else's path. Very few can lay down their own. They spend about 40 days on that line. 40 days is an entire season in the mountains of the Karakoram. It pushes upwards and retreats back down, carries, waiting on weather, and the slow wearing down of the body at altitude. And the line doesn't give in. At some point, the brothers make a decision that's harder than any climb. They give up their own route. In July 1997, they do reach the summit of Broad Peak by the normal route, like everyone else. On paper, an 8th mountain appears on the list. In reality, it's a season they failed and closed out anyway. Episodes like that explain a lot about Felix's character. He doesn't like it when climbers are turned into heroes, and he says so plainly. In his words, society needs heroes too badly and hands out that label far too readily. Behind his climbs, there's no recklessness. There's calculation, preparation, and a willingness to turn around. For the brothers, retreat isn't defeat. It's part of the job. The mountain decides who it lets in. The person decides when to leave. Many years later, Alberto will turn that thought into a public talk of its own, one he'll call a tribute to failure. But the idea wasn't born in a lecture hall in front of an audience. It was born on Broad Peak, over 40 days of work that looked useless at first glance. The next 3 seasons run smoothly, almost to a timetable. May 1998, Dhaulagiri, the 9th mountain on the list. July 1999, Nanga Parbat, one of the harshest peaks in the Himalaya, the 10th. April 2000, Manaslu, the 11th. But on Nanga Parbat, there's an episode that never makes it into the ascent statistics. During the expedition, the brothers take part in a rescue on the route. To understand the weight of that decision, you have to remember how altitude works. On an 8,000er, every extra hour up high takes strength you might need later for your own descent. Helping a stranger here is paid for with your own summit, and sometimes with more than that, which is why people walk past more often than anyone likes to admit. Felix and Alberto don't walk past. That episode seals their reputation as men who don't leave people behind, and in the Basque mountain world, that carries just as much weight as a list of summits. By the summer of 2000, the arithmetic is almost indecent. 11 8,000ers climbed as a pair, without oxygen, in small teams. No two relatives in the history of the Himalaya had ever put together that many summits side by side. Only 3 mountains stand between them, and the full list of 14. Felix is 33 years old. He's at the peak of his form, with nearly 10 years of continuous work at altitude behind him. Ahead lies the Karakoram, one more Pakistani season, and 2 8,000ers standing so close to each other that you can try to take both in a single trip. To understand where they're heading, you need to get your head around the geography of this place just once, because there's nothing like it anywhere else on the planet. At the very head of the Baltoro Glacier, on the border between Pakistan and China, 2 8,000-meter summits stand side by side. Gasherbrum 1, 8,080 meters, and Gasherbrum 2, 8,035 meters. What separates them is 45 meters of height and a few kilometers of glacier. The first of them has a second name, Hidden Peak. The name is literal. From below, from the valley, you simply can't see this mountain. The neighboring walls block it out. For decades, people walked the Baltoro without suspecting that behind the nearest spur hid the 11th highest mountain in the world. And now, the important part. Both mountains are served by one shared base camp at 5,150 meters on the South Gasherbrum Glacier. One site, the same tents, the same kitchen, the same neighbors. In the morning, you step out of your tent and go either right or left. And those are 2 completely different 8,000ers. Nowhere else works like this. Everywhere else, every big mountain has its own camp and its own logistics, hence the habit of expeditions here. If you've come to the Gasherbrums, take both summits in one season, the base is the same anyway. In 1984, Reinhold Messner and Hans Kammerlander pushed the idea to its limit and climbed both mountains without descending to camp at all, as a traverse. The climbing history of these peaks is short. Gasherbrum 2 was first climbed in 1956 by the Austrians Fritz Moravec, Joseph Larch, and Hans Willenpart. Gasherbrum 1 gave in 2 years later, in 1958, to the Americans Pete Schoening and Andy Kaufman. And now the strangest thing about this place. The odds of getting home from these 2 mountains are nothing alike. Gasherbrum 2 has a reputation as the safest 8,000er on the planet, alongside Cho Oyu. The figures back it up. More than 900 successful ascents and around 20 deaths in its entire history. A fatality rate of roughly 2%. For mountains of this size, that's exceptionally gentle statistics. Gasherbrum 1, depending on the count, comes out somewhere between 9 and 14%. The estimates differ, but the order of magnitude isn't in dispute. The gap between the neighbors is almost 5-fold. One valley, one glacier, the same base camp, the same caravan inn, the same dates, the same weather. Different odds of getting home. The reason isn't the climate and it isn't luck. It's geometry. On Gasherbrum 2, the standard line follows the southwest ridge, a moderate snow and ice route with no so-called crux, no stretch where everything is decided and where you can't afford a mistake. The climb is long and tiring, but by its nature, it's even. On Gasherbrum 1, all the lines, however different they are lower down, converge in the upper part on a single point. The Japanese couloir. It's a steep gully of snow and ice, the narrow throat of the mountain, and everyone passes through it. The couloir works like a funnel. Anything that comes loose higher up the route runs down into exactly this place, and stopping on that slope is almost impossible. In the summer of 2000, the Inurrategi brothers planned to close out both summits in one go, and they start with the one that's considered easy. The morning of the 28th of July, 2000, Camp 2, at around 6,500 meters. 2 figures step out of the tent in the dark and begin their summit push. It's clear straight away that this won't be an easy day. The snow on the route lies heavy and deep, and every single step has to be broken through. Trail breaking at that altitude is work that drains a person faster than any steep section. You move slowly, you breathe hard, and the altitude won't let you recover between steps. The brothers swap the lead and simply grind the slope down. The climb takes about 8 hours, and still they get there. On the summit of Gasherbrum 2, they're met by clear sunshine, a rare piece of luck in the Karakoram, where summit day more often happens in cloud and wind. It's their 12th 8,000-meter summit together, the 12th taken by one and the same rope team since 1991, since that first Makalu. As always, with no bottled oxygen, a small team, Alpine style, under their own power. Below them, almost 3 kilometers down, sits the shared base camp, and from up here you can see the second target of the season perfectly clearly. Gasherbrum 1 is waiting literally opposite. After that, only Annapurna would be left, and then the full list of 14 summits, collected as a pair, which nobody had ever done. Everything that matters seems to be behind them already. The mountain they're standing on is considered the safest of all 14 8,000ers in the world. Statistically, out of every 100 people who reach this summit, 2 don't come home. The summit is half the job. The other half begins the moment you turn your back on it. They go down the same day without hanging about. The target is the first camp. It's lower there, the air is thicker, and there you can finally get some sleep. The way leads through the section between the second camp and the first. It's the steepest part of the classic route, an ice slope that takes technique as well as stamina. On the way up, you cross it fresh and alert. On the way down, after 8 hours of trail breaking and a summit, you don't. Fatigue at altitude works quietly. It doesn't knock you off your feet, it just slows your reactions a little and dulls your attention a little. This is where Felix falls. The fall was about 400 meters. Alberto sees it. There's nothing he can do. The distance and the slope leave no time at all to react. The man he had climbed 12 of the highest mountains on the planet with, and spent almost his entire adult life alongside, disappears in front of him in a matter of moments. Felix falls off to the side of the route, into ground where people don't normally go at all. He stays in the mountains for good. The exact cause of the fall was never established. Sources still disagree. Some speak of a rope that gave way, others of a belay point that failed. Neither of these versions is confirmed, and the difference between them is fundamental. Losing your footing is one thing. Equipment letting you down is quite another. The honest answer is a short one. He fell on the descent, and that is all that is known for certain. The news reaches the Basque country the same day. Aretzabaleta, the town where it all started with club outings at the weekend, loses its most famous son. The shock spreads far beyond that town. The first thing Alberto does after coming home is stop. He walks away from the big mountains, and nobody knows whether he'll come back at all. For more than 10 years, he had gone up with one and the same person, and he didn't know any other way. He returns in 2001, and he returns to exactly the same place, that same base camp at 5,150 meters, on the South Gasherbrum Glacier. Only this time he steps out of the tent in the other direction. To the right, towards Gasherbrum 1, the mountain where the death rate is 5 times higher than on its neighbor. He takes the summit by the classic route, alone now. That leaves Annapurna. On the 16th of May, 2002, Alberto climbs it by the East Ridge, roped up with the Frenchman Jean-Christophe Lafayette. It's the first repeat of that route and, by his own account, the hardest climb of his life. 3 nights above 7,000 meters, right at the edge of what a human being can take. And so, the circle closes, the one that began in 1991 on Makalu, where he arrived together with Felix. Alberto Inurrategi becomes the 10th person in history to climb all 14 8,000ers, every one of them without bottled oxygen. At that moment, he's the youngest man on that list. He is 33 years old, the same age Felix was on the descent from Gasherbrum 2. 12 of the 14 summits on that list they climbed together, more than any other pair of relatives in the entire history of the Himalaya. The last 2, Alberto reached on his own, and he never counted them as only his. A rope team that had climbed together all its life came apart on the safest of the 14 mountains, and the account was closed anyway, for both of them. He was the man in charge of mountain safety for an entire country, 8 8,000ers without oxygen, an award for saving other people's lives on Tau Lagiri, the president's chair at the Czech Mountaineering Association. In early August of 2013, at around 7,000 meters on the southwest face of Gasherbrum 1, Zdenek Hruby makes the first Rappel move of that morning and clips the rope into the wrong carabiner. After that, a kilometer of falling and silence. How does a man who wrote the belay rules for thousands of climbers break the very first one himself? And why, 4 years later, did his partner come back to that wall to give the route a name made of a single word? Zdenek Hruby is born in 1956 in the Czechoslovak town of Uherské Hradiště, a long way from any big mountains. his first profession has nothing to do with them at all. He enrolls at the Czech Technical University in Prague and studies cybernetics, the mathematics of control, systems theory, the logic of large processes. Economics comes later. He studies in Germany and in England. That kind of background usually produces a desk man, and Hruby does in fact become one. From 2002 to 2005, he serves as Deputy Finance Minister of the Czech Republic, responsible for the country's integration into the European Union. It is a job where decisions are measured in billions and in years of negotiation, and where the working tools are a spreadsheet and a signature. Alongside that, he teaches at the Faculty of Social Sciences at Charles University in Prague, and travels as a visiting professor to the Australian National University. And all this time, he has a second life. It starts on the Czech sandstone towers, rocks that work like a strict school for local climbers. Sandstone is soft, you cannot drive metal into it, so protection rests on knots jammed into cracks. That kind of rock teaches you to calculate risk in advance and never to lean on hardware where everything is decided in your head. Then, the Himalaya and the Karakoram appear in his life. And here Hruby picks an approach that explains a great deal about everything that follows. Light, self-contained ascents, no oxygen, no long chain of camps, no big support team. He is not collecting summits for the count. What interests him is a problem that can be solved with small means, much the same way a complex system gets solved with limited resources in his day job. A man with 2 degrees goes off to a place where degrees mean nothing. His first genuinely big mountain comes in 1994. It is Cho Oyu, a 6,000er by character and an 8,000er by height, the summit where many people begin their acquaintance with thin air. Hruby is 38, and he does what most people do. He goes up the normal route to find out how his body behaves above 8,000 meters. 3 years later, he is in the Karakoram, and in a single season, he climbs 2 summits at once, Gasherbrum 1 and Gasherbrum 2. Back then, these mountains are just entries on a list for him. He does not yet know that he will come back to the first of them twice, and that it will be the last of his life. In 1999, Lhotse joins the list, the 4th highest mountain on the planet. And then something important shifts in his biography. His interest moves from altitude to method. In 2004, Hruby climbs Shishapangma by the McIntyre route, in alpine style. Back home in the Czech Republic, that ascent is voted the best of the year. 2 years after that, he moves into a completely different climate zone, the Vinson Massif in Antarctica, and that too brings a national award. The logic of his choices becomes easy to read. The older he gets, the less the simple classic lines appeal to him. He collects 8 summits above 8 kilometers over 18 years, but what he counts as his real career is not the list. It is the climbs where he had to solve the problem from scratch. One of his ascents stands apart from the whole of his biography, and it is the one he is proudest of. Ahead of it comes the year 2007 and Broad Peak in the Karakoram, another summit taken in his usual economical style. And in 2008, Hruby heads for Nepal, for Dhaulagiri, together with Radek Jarosz, one of the strongest Czech high-altitude climbers. Dhaulagiri stands on its own, catching the strong wind off the plain, and because of how remote it is, a rescue operation there is often impossible. The Czech pair are moving on their own schedule when they come across people in trouble on the route. Climbers who can no longer descend under their own power. What happens next is a rare thing in high-altitude mountaineering. Hruby and Jarosz scrap their own plans, give up the summit they came for, and spend their strength and their time on other people's lives. Exactly how many they brought down, the sources put differently. Some say 2, some say 3. The outcome nobody disputes. Those people came down alive. For this, both climbers received the Fair Play Award from the Czech Club and a Fair Play Award from the European movement. Hruby will later say that he considers this the most successful ascent of his life. Not the one where he climbed highest, but the one where he brought down more than just himself. In 2012, at the age of 55, he climbs Nanga Parbat. It is the 8th summit above 8,000 meters in his biography, and the last one he will ever take. A few years before that, in 2009, a meeting takes place in Prague that changes his standing in Czech climbing. Hruby is elected president of the Czech Mountaineering Association, the body responsible for training, grades, belay standards, and safety rules for everyone in the country who goes into the mountains. He is voted into the post twice, and he stays in charge until his final day. What you get is a rare kind of figure. The man signing off documents on how to handle equipment correctly is still out there climbing at his own limit. He does not turn into an official who happens to work around mountains. He stays a working climber who has simply added one more job to what he already does. And in that same year, he takes on a goal that will occupy the rest of his life. Together with Marek Holicek, his regular partner, Hruby picks the southwest face of Gasherbrum 1. By 2009, no team had climbed that face. The mountain is also known as Hidden Peak from bottom to top. It is a big technical mix of ice and rock, where you cannot fix ropes the whole way up, and where the only way down is the way you came. The two Czechs call their project Never Stop Exploring. The name sounds like an advertising slogan, but for them, it means something very specific. Don't go where everything is already known. The first attempt is set for that same season. The face lets them go further than they could have hoped. The main obstacle on the lower half is a rock barrier at around 7,400 meters, a band of hard stone blocking the line of ascent. The pair get through it. There is not that much left to the summit, and at that moment, it is not the mountain that makes the decision. It is a body. At the camp above, Hruby's stomach ulcer opens up. Down at sea level, that is a serious but manageable case, a phone call, a hospital, a drip. At 7,000 meters with no way down, it comes down to hours. He is vomiting. He loses strength with every movement, and there is no help of any kind up here. A helicopter will not reach that altitude. There are no rescuers, and there are no neighboring teams. And so, a 53-year-old man in appalling shape starts down under his own power, 200 meters of rappelling, descending on a fixed rope through that same rock band. Then around 1,700 meters of an ice couloir, a long gully where you cannot sit down and rest, because the slope drops away at a steep angle. The pair spend the night in a cave under a serac, inside a block of ice that could collapse at any minute on its own. In the morning, they walk out onto the glacier. 2 days later, a helicopter lifts Hruby out of base camp. He survives, but the project stays open. Holicek does not go down that season. He climbs Gasherbrum 1 solo, not by their shared face, but by the Japanese couloir. For him, it is a first ascent of Gasherbrum 1. For their joint project, it is nothing more than a note that the face is still unclimbed. 4 years pass, and in May of 2013, the same pair turn up in a completely different corner of the Himalaya, the Kangchenjunga region, at the 7,000er Talung. The mountain is modest by the standards of their careers, only 7,349 meters, but it has a face that nobody had been up before them. Around 2,500 meters of climbing, ice fields, rock plugs, sections where you work on the front points of your crampons with 2 tools. Even the aspect of the face does not always match from one account to the next. Some call it the north face, others the northwest. They go in pure alpine style. They set out on the 15th of May. Then 5 days of continuous work, bivouacs on the wall, where sometimes there is nowhere to pitch the tent. On the 19th of May, the pair are standing on the summit. On the 20th, they are back in base camp. The route is graded water ice 6, mixed 6+, the top end of the scale, ice of extreme steepness and mixed climbing, where solid holds barely exist. The Czech Mountaineering Association, the very body Hruby runs, names it the ascent of the year. The route is nominated for the Paille d'Or, the biggest international prize in mountaineering, and this is where the numbers are worth pausing on. Hruby is 56 years old. He is not a veteran taken along out of respect for past achievements, and he is not a passenger on his partner's rope. He is working a top-grade route as an equal alongside a man 14 years younger than him. He comes back from Nepal in the best shape he has been in for years, and almost immediately starts preparing for the summer season in the Karakoram. He and Holicek have unfinished business that both of them have kept coming back to in their heads since 2009. That summer, the base camp of the Czech expedition sits on the glacier below Gasherbrum 1. There are several people on the team, but only 2 of them go onto the face, Hruby and Holicek. The rest work down below, on the classic routes. The plan is the same one they used on Talung, and it contains the key detail of this whole story. Every extra kilogram at that altitude costs you hours, and hours on an 8,000er are your reserve of life. So they take nothing extra. They have 1 rope. There is no second, spare one in the packs. While you are going up, that does not look dangerous. The rope is there for protection, and it is in your hands. But on the way down, a single rope turns into your only way off the mountain. You rappel on it, sliding down the fixed end again and again, pitch after pitch. If it disappears, the face instantly becomes a trap. The climb itself goes badly. The face is in poor condition that season. The weather never gives them the window they need. Their pace drops. And so, the pair make a decision Hruby has made many times over his years in the mountains. Turn around. There will be no summit. If anything, this looks like a normal, grown-up, professionally calculated retreat. Precisely the thing he, as president of the association, would teach any Czech beginner. The mountain is not going anywhere. The face has stood there since 2009, and it will stand a while longer. The two of them turn around and start down their own line of ascent, a long series of rappels down the full length of the southwest face. Early August 2013, at around 7,000 meters. Morning, cold, all your attention going into moving and not freezing. Ahead of them is the first rappel of the day. To understand what happens next, you need to know about one piece of equipment. A carabiner used for rappelling has to be a locking one. It has a screw or snap sleeve that blocks the gate from opening. This is a first-year rule. It is taught everywhere, in every club, in every country, and in the Czech Association, Hruby runs. It is written into the training material. Alongside the locking carabiners, there are always plain ones hanging on the harness too. Light, no lock, off the quick draws you use to clip protection on the way up. They look alike. In gloves, in the cold, at 7,000 meters, they feel even more alike. Hruby clips the rope not into a locking carabiner, but into an ordinary quick draw. A non-locking carabiner holds the load right up until something presses on its moving part. An awkward touch against the rope, against the rock, against your own harness is enough. It opens, and there is nothing left underneath the climber. Holček hears only a short cry, and then the silence comes back. His partner disappears from view somewhere below, in the ice gully, the fall, around a kilometer. This happens the day before Hruby's 57th birthday. A man who spent 18 years going up 8,000ers without oxygen, who brought other people's lives down off Dhaulagiri, and who was responsible for the safety standards of an entire country, dies because of a piece of metal weighing 40 grams, picked up without a glance. Up above, Marek Holeček is left almost without a way out. The pair's equipment went down with his partner, and so did that one and only rope. He has no second one and no way of going back for it. Below him is around a kilometer of ice and rock that was supposed to be descended by rappel, and now he has to get down it by climbing, facing into the slope, with nothing protecting him, at an altitude where the body starts failing on its own. He descends, hour after hour, pitch after pitch, with a level of concentration he cannot let slip for a single second. He had no right to a second mistake that morning, and he reaches the glacier alive. Hruby's body stays down there, in the zone of ice crevasses below the first camp. Recovering it is impossible. A helicopter will not go in there, and a ground operation on that terrain would mean more deaths. The crevasse he went into becomes his resting place. In the mountains, that happens more often than people tend to think. The first reports are contradictory. Word comes out of Pakistan that the climber slipped and fell 1,000 meters into the crevasses. Almost straight away another version appears, that he was swept away by an avalanche. The Czech media first run headlines about an avalanche, then change them a few days later. The cause given is a rappel. The difference matters. An avalanche is an accident, an act of nature, nature's fault. An equipment error is a human factor, and that is the version the climbing community eventually accepts. The analysis turns out to be short and blunt. There is no mystery in this story. There is a wrongly chosen carabiner on the first rappel of the day. In September of 2013, a farewell is held in the Czech Republic. A memorial plaque to Hruby is set up in the climbers' cemetery at Hruba Skala, among the same sandstone towers where he once started. He leaves behind 2 children, a chair at the head of the association that somebody else will have to take, and an unfinished line on the southwest face. Holček goes back to that face again and again. Counting from 2009, he comes here 5 times, each time falling back, because of the weather, because of the state of the ice. because the wall simply will not let him through. The sixth attempt falls in the summer of 2017. With him goes Zdenek, the same first name as the man who died. Between the 25th of July and the 1st of August, the pair climbed the entire southwest face of Gasherbrum 1, bottom to top, in alpine style, without oxygen and without support. Around 2,600 meters, graded ED+, water ice 5+, mixed 7 Oxer, the extreme end of the scale, ice and mixed climbing of the highest level. 6 days on the wall, nights on ledges scratched out of the ice. They reach the summit in a strong, gusting wind and come down by the Japanese couloir, the same gully Holacek went up solo back in 2009. They give the route a single word: satisfaction. The climb is dedicated to the memory of the man who started that line 8 years earlier and never got to finish it. In 2018, it wins the Piolet d'Or, the highest award in world mountaineering. The face Zdenek Hruby went to twice had finally been climbed. He himself had been gone from it for 4 years by then, because of one carabiner picked up without a glance on the first rappel move of an ordinary August morning. He made a few turns on his skis, and the slope beneath him began to move. A few seconds later, the man was no longer visible. The 25th of July, 2015, Gasherbrum 2, the stretch between Camp 2 and Camp 1. Not a summit push, not a sheer wall, not the last brutal meters near the top. An ordinary descent down a familiar line, on a mountain people call one of the safest of its class. Aleksander Ostrowski was 27. He was a mountain rescuer and the first Pole ever to ski down an 8,000er. What happened on that slope? Nobody knows to this day. He was never found. Let's start in the village where he first stood on skis at the age of 3. Wetlina is a small village in the southeast of Poland, right up against the border. Around it lie the Bieszczady Mountains, low forested ridges where the highest summit barely clears 1,300 meters. This is where Aleksander Ostrowski is born in 1988, and everyone simply calls him Olek. The mountains he grows up in don't look serious. They look more like long green waves, buried in snow all winter. But they turn him into a skier before he can properly read. 3 years old is a normal age in the Bieszczady to put a child on skis. The snow lies for months, the slopes are right there, and there isn't much else on offer. What isn't normal is how fast this village boy starts winning. He races in events under the banner of the International Ski Federation, and in 2004, he takes the Amateur Subcarpathian Alpine Skiing Championship. He is 16. After that comes the usual road of a Polish teenager from the provinces. Secondary school in Ostrowski Dolny, the district town a couple of dozen kilometers from home. Then Kraków, the big city, university. He leaves, but he doesn't cut the cord. The Bieszczady stay the place he comes back to, where his parents live and where people know him by his first name. There is nothing in this biography that predicts the Karakoram. No mountaineering dynasty, no club with traditions, no 8,000ers anywhere on the horizon. Just a village at the foot of some modest hills, and a boy who has been on skis since he was 3 and can ride any kind of snow. The gap between the Bieszczady and the Himalaya looks impossible to close. It will take Ostrowski roughly 10 years to close it, and along the whole way the skis will stay not a hobby, but his main tool. In 2007, a 19-year-old pulls on the red jacket with the GOPR badge. This is the Polish Mountain Rescue Service, built on volunteers, people with ordinary jobs and studies who take shifts, answer call-outs, and dig out of the snow those who overestimated themselves. Ostrowski joins the Bieszczady group, based in Sanok, which means he works in the very mountains he grew up in. Rescue work flips your relationship with the mountains. A tourist looks at a slope and sees scenery. A rescuer sees the line a fall would take. An avalanche stops being a natural disaster from the news and becomes a working situation with a clear protocol. And the same goes for weather. Not a reason to cut a walk short, but part of the problem to be solved. Ostrowski gets used to heading out exactly when everyone else turns around and goes indoors. In those same years, he's studying in Kraków, at the Institute of Geography and Spatial Management at the Jagiellonian University. The subject isn't an accident. A man who reads terrain on the ground goes off to study that same terrain on maps and satellite images. He also earns an instructor's certificate from the Polish Ski Association, which means he can not only ride himself, but explain to others how to ride. The result is a packed schedule: lectures, rescue shifts, training, and his own mountain plans, which are getting more ambitious by the season. Each part feeds the others. Instructing brings in money, rescue work brings experience and a cool head, university brings an understanding of how mountains are put together from the inside. This is not the portrait of a reckless man chasing adrenaline. Quite the opposite. This is a professional who knows the price of snow better than most people his age. And it's exactly this world, small, tight-knit, with a long memory for its own, that will one day become the main keeper of his name. But that's still far off. For now, Ostrowski is looking beyond the Bieszczady. The Alps are the first real test. Ostrowski climbs Mont Blanc, the Matterhorn, the Großglockner, the classics almost every European mountaineer passes through. Here he sees for the first time what real altitude and real ice actually look like. But he has no intention of staying at this level. In 2012, he finds himself on Lenin Peak, 7,134 meters, in the Pamir, and he skis down from it. 2 years later comes a ski descent from Kazbek. By this point, it's clear that we're not looking at a climber who sometimes skis, or a skier who sometimes climbs. Ostrowski fuses the two disciplines into one and puts the second in service of the first. The logic here turns ordinary mountaineering inside out. Normally, the summit is the goal, and the descent is an exhausting obligation you have to survive. In ski mountaineering, it's the reverse. You go up in order to come down. The summit becomes a launch pad. He gives his project a name that says it plainly: Climb to Ski. That approach comes at a price. Skis and boots have to be carried the whole way up. Several extra kilograms on every single step in thin air. You can't spend everything you have on the way to the top, because the real work starts after the summit. And worst of all, on the way down, there's no margin for error. A climber on foot who stumbles can often still arrest the slide. A skier at speed almost never can. In exchange, there's a gain, and that gain is the whole point. A ski descent takes hours where walking takes a full day. You get off the altitude faster, out of the zone where the body breaks down with every passing hour. Skis here aren't a stunt or a trick for the camera. They're a way to spend less time at 8,000 meters than anyone else would. In the autumn of 2014, all of this stops being theory. On the 29th of September, Ostrowski is standing on the summit of Cho Oyu, 8,188 meters, the sixth highest peak on the planet, on the border of Nepal and Tibet. He got up there without supplementary oxygen, which means he breathed the air that's actually up there, roughly a third of what you get at sea level. And then he does the thing he came for. He clips into his skis right on the summit and rides down, the first Pole in history to do it. Before him, his countrymen had climbed 8,000ers by the dozen, but nobody had skied down from that height. One descent, and a national record that still gets quoted in Polish mountain chronicles. At 8 kilometers above the sea, every movement comes with a delay. The muscles run on borrowed credit. The brain thinks slower than usual. The snow up there is unpredictable, concrete hard one moment, then loose and collapsing under the edge. Mistakes are expensive, and there's nobody to come and help. He pulls it off. The footage from the expedition is shown at the Krakow Mountain Festival. The film picks up recognition, and Ostrowski himself is named Traveler of the Year by National Geographic Traveler. A 26-year-old rescuer from a village in the Bieszczady becomes a name to the whole Polish mountain scene. There is, though, a catch in that success, and he understands it better than the journalists do. Cho Oyu is one of the most accessible 8,000ers, gentle, technically undemanding, with relatively forgiving statistics. The perfect mountain for proving that such a descent is possible at all. But that same accessibility is what devalues the achievement in the eyes of the strict purists. So the next mountain has to be harder, further away, with no ready-made infrastructure and no crowds on the route. Ostrowski starts looking towards the Karakoram, a range where the 8,000ers stand clustered together and have a much rougher temperament. The choice falls on Gasherbrum 2, 8,035 meters, on the border of Pakistan and China, the 13th highest 8,000er, surrounded by its own kind. No Pole has ever skied down from that summit, and that's precisely the sentence the whole expedition exists to produce. The team turns out to be as small as it gets. 2 men, Ostrowski and Piotr Śnigorski, a photographer, ski instructor, and climber. No reserve members, no doctor. The declared style is minimalist, no supplementary oxygen, and no high-altitude porters. That means they carry every load up themselves, fix every rope themselves, and can count on nobody but each other. The route is the classic one, the southwest ridge from the Pakistani side, the same line the first ascensionists took. There is, however, an obstacle that mountain films mention far less often than avalanches: money. The expedition costs around 80,000 zloty, the permit, the travel, porters on the approach, equipment, insurance. A GOPR rescuer doesn't have that kind of money and never will. Ostrowski goes to a crowdfunding platform and asks strangers for help. "We can't cover a sum like this on our own, but there's strength in numbers," is roughly how his appeal goes. The campaign closes at 50,316 zloty, 125% of the stated goal. The mountain is effectively paid for by the Polish public, chipping in together. People ask him whether hauling skis up an 8,000er isn't just an eccentric stunt. He answers without any edge to it. Some people think we're crazy, but he doesn't feel like a freak. To him, this is sport joined with exploration, and a way to take a mountain faster and cleaner than usual. In the summer of 2015, the money raised turns into plane tickets, crates of gear, and a caravan heading for the Baltoro Glacier. Gasherbrum, too, is considered one of the calmer summits in the area, but that calm applies only to the way up. In summer, the Karakoram glaciers are cut through with crevasses, and some of them sit masked by a deceptive snow bridge. The expedition sets off in mid-June, 2015. What follows is the long, dull, and absolutely necessary work. The approach, setting up base camp, acclimatization rotations, hauling loads to the intermediate camps. The pair go up and come down, teaching their bodies to live at altitude. There's no romance in it at all. There's a schedule, and there's patience. By the last 10 days of July, the weather starts to turn. There's more snow on the slopes than anyone would want for a ski descent. Fresh snow sitting on a hard base is a textbook recipe for an avalanche, and both men know that professionally. On the 21st of July, Ostrowski and Śnigorski leave base camp for the decisive summit push. In 2 days, they reach Camp 3, the last platform before the top. From here, the goal is one single effort away, and that descent, the one they raised the money for and dragged the skis halfway across the world for, finally looks genuinely within reach. On the 25th of July, the pair set off upwards. The snow is deep, fresh, and untracked. Every step sinks in, and whoever is in front is essentially cutting a trench with his own body. They swap places, push on, swap again. That goes on for about 12 hours. 12 hours of climbing through deep snow, with no oxygen cylinders and no porters to break trail in advance. The conditions don't improve. If anything, there's more snow, and the weather presses down harder. Their speed drops, and with it grows the chance that they'll be going back down in the dark, wrung out to the last drop. At around 7,600 meters, they stop. There are a little over 400 vertical meters left to the summit. By flatland standards, that's nothing, half an hour's walk. Up here, it could cost several more hours of work, and there's no reserve left for the way back. They turn around. It's worth understanding exactly what they're giving up. Not just a nice line in a biography. The entire expedition was built around a descent from the summit. That's what hundreds of people put money in for. That's why they chose this mountain. That's why the skis came up on their backs. By turning back at 7,600, Ostrowski loses the whole point of the trip. The first Polish ski descent of Gasherbrum 2 isn't going to happen. By every standard of mountain ethics, it's the right call. This is exactly how professionals are supposed to behave. Read the snow, count the hours, and retreat while retreat is still possible. Not a single analysis afterwards will hold it against them. They clip into their skis and ride down towards Camp 3. The dangerous part, or so the thinking goes, has been left above them. Ahead lies nothing but a descent along ground they already know, the same line they've been climbing for days. Below Camp 2, the snow changes. Here, on the approach to Camp 1, the conditions turn out to be noticeably worse than they were higher up. The slope has a different shape, the sun has worked on it differently, and the snowpack lies differently than it does above. Ostrowski goes first. He's the better skier of the two, and he leads out of habit. he rolls onto a section carved up with deep crevasses and gullies. A skier reads a place like that instantly. Too many traps, too little room to maneuver. Ostrowski turns and moves further left, onto a wider and gentler slope, where by any logic it should be safer. It's a sensible choice, exactly the one taught on Avalanche courses, exactly the one he himself, as a rescuer, would have explained to somebody else. What comes next is known from the account of Śniegorski, the only person who saw it. Ostrowski makes a few turns, and on those turns the slope beneath him lets go. A slab releases, a dense layer of fresh snow that had been sitting on a slick base. A slab like that doesn't creep away slowly. It breaks off all at once, across its full width, and runs downhill picking up speed. Ostrowski is inside the release zone. A few seconds pass. According to his partner, Ostrowski disappears from view. The slope below, as he describes it, drops away sharply. One moment there's a man in motion out in front, leaving an arcing track behind him, and then there is nothing there. Śniegorski is alone on the slope. He's the only direct witness, and yet he didn't see the thing that matters most. He saw the beginning, the slab tearing loose and his partner taken downhill. What happened after that, beyond the roll of the slope, nobody saw. Between Camp 2 and Camp 1 on Gasherbrum 2, Aleksander Ostrowski stops existing for the world of the living. A precise account of how it happened will never exist. The news travels down to base camp, and from there to Poland. On the morning of the 26th of July, a group of high-altitude porters sets out from the foot of the mountain. The very Pakistani workers the expedition had deliberately not hired for the climb. Now they're going up to look for one of its members. The search area is defined fairly precisely, the same stretch of the route where he was last seen. The porters work the slope, inspect the crevasses, cross the release zone. On terrain like that, it's close to working blind. The snow mass that came down the slope hides everything that lay in its path, and the crevasses run down to depths you can neither see into nor reach. On the 27th of July, after a morning of searching, the operation is called off. The reasons are stated plainly: heavy weather, the nature of the terrain, and the complete absence of any trace. No equipment, no ski, no scrap of clothing, nothing to work from. The decision is announced by Jerzy Netkanski of the Polish Mountaineering Foundation. The wording is dry. The area where the Polish ski mountaineer disappeared has been searched. No traces were found, and continuing the operation in these conditions is impossible. A second witness turns up, an indirect one. A Spanish climber who was coming back from neighboring Gasherbrum 1 in those same days also saw an avalanche come down the slope. In his account, the avalanche pushed the pole into a crevasse. It's an observation from the side, from a distance, but it's the one that becomes the basis for the most widely repeated reconstruction of what happened. He was never found, not then, and not in the years that followed. Aleksander Ostrowski stayed on the slope of Gasherbrum 2 for good. He was 27 years old. 400 meters of climbing separated him from the summit the whole thing had been built around. But that isn't where he died. He died on the way home, on a section everybody passes and everybody treats as routine. 10 years on, the cause of his death still hasn't been established. There are two versions, and both are alive at the same time. The first is the avalanche. A slab released and caught the skier out on an open slope. That picture is supported by Śniegorski's description, since he saw the slab tear loose, and by the Spaniard's observation from the neighboring mountain. The second is the crevasse. In this version, the avalanche didn't so much cover the skier with snow as drop him into a glacial crevasse concealed beneath the snow cover. This version gets talked through just as often, and in Polish publications it appears on equal footing with the first. The difference between them might look like a technicality, since the outcome is the same either way. But it shows very well how little is actually known. The witness saw only the beginning, the snow moving, and the man vanishing beyond the roll of the slope. What happened seconds later is a question without an answer. The search turned up not one single trace, and with nothing found, there is nothing to check against. All that's left here is to say it honestly. There is no precise answer, and most likely there never will be. There's a second thing worth noting about this story. Ostrowski himself, contrary to the image of the reckless skier, was a rescuer who read snow professionally, and on that day he gave up the summit for safety's sake. No risk beyond reason, no stubbornness, no chasing a record at any cost. And it still wasn't enough. In the Bieszczady, by the mountain hut in Wetlina, a ski mountaineering memorial race for Oleg Ostrowski is held every winter. It's organized by GOPR, the same service he served in from the age of 19. Pairs come out onto the course from every Polish mountain rescue group, 2 people roped together, skis, a climb, and a descent. Exactly what he did. Exactly where he grew up. There is a blog with a simple name, Mountain Stories. It was written by Abel Alonso, a climber from Pontevedra. Notes about expeditions, camps, approaches, about what one more day on a glacier actually looks like. The last entry is dated the middle of July 2013. Gasherbrum 1, 8,080 meters. On the 21st of July, Alonso and 4 companions are standing roughly 100 vertical meters below the summit. 2 of them turn around and go down. 3, Alonso among them, keep going and reach the top. Not one more line will ever appear on that blog. In the summer of 2013, a Spanish expedition sets off for the Pakistani Karakoram. The target is Gasherbrum 1, 8,080 meters, also known as Hidden Peak. The organizing is handled by the agency Aragon Aventura. The team comes out mixed, pulled together from all over the country. The core is members of the Aran Valley Climbing Club: David Lopez, Oscar Montoya, David Polo, Alex Galeano. They are joined by Xavi Gomez from Girona, Alvaro Paredes from Valladolid, Abel Alonso from Pontevedra, and Alfredo Garcia from La Rioja. 2 more high-altitude veterans work at base camp, Oscar Kadiash and Patsy Gonyi, people from different clubs with different schooling, different habits in the mountains. On an 8,000er, that is the usual story. An expedition often comes together, not out of childhood friends, but out of whoever, in that particular year, could pay for the permit and get the time off. Gasherbrum 1 has a peculiarity of its own. The route up runs through the Japanese couloir, and it is on the way down through it that the mountain usually claims its lives. The engine behind the whole idea was Xavi Gomez, a climber from Girona, a member of the Sarriá de Ter Mountain Club. He is 37. 8,000ers are nothing new to him. There is serious high-altitude work behind him, including an expedition to Cho Oyu in 2010. He is the one who gathers the people and carries the organizing. Alvaro Paredes was born in 1978 in Valladolid and spent his entire adult life in the service. He joined the city's municipal fire brigade at the end of '97 and worked his way up to shift commander. On top of that, a diving instructor, a technical specialist in canyoning, a teacher at the San Viator school. In 2010, Paredes became the first resident of Valladolid to climb Cho Oyu, 8,188 meters. But in his home city, he was known for more than the mountains. He led a nationwide campaign by Spanish firefighters to revise the retirement age and pushed it all the way through to a change in the law. A man who knew how not to give ground in an office was unlikely to give ground easily on a slope either. The third was Abel Alonso, 39, from Pontevedra, the very author of the blog Mountain Stories we started with. 3 men from 3 different corners of Spain: Catalonia, Castile, Galicia, no shared club, no shared biography. What they would end up sharing is 1 summit and 1 descent. By the middle of July, a chain of high camps is already standing on the route. They are built up gradually. You carry tents, food, and gas up, come back down to rest, go up again. This is the slow arithmetic of acclimatization, and there is no getting around it. The body has to adjust to air that holds half the oxygen it is used to. The last platform before the summit push is Camp 3, at 7,200 meters. Above that mark, there are no tents. From here, the group has to set out at night, climb almost a vertical kilometer, stand on the summit, and come back to those same tents. 1 long day. If it stretches, they will be spending the night out on the slope. Abel Alonso records the expedition's progress in his notes. Base camp, intermediate points, work on the route. The Karakoram is stingy with weather that season. Stable windows are few, forecasts are short, and every team on the mountain is hunting for its moment. Waiting forever is not an option. The permit runs out, the season runs out, the money and the strength run out. The route chosen is the classic one, coming onto the upper part of the mountain through that same Japanese couloir. Nothing experimental, nothing heroic. The ordinary line that everyone uses. When the window finally opens, the decision comes fast. On the night before the push, 7 people in Camp 3 sort their gear, melt snow, try to sleep at an altitude where sleep barely comes. In the morning of the 21st of July, they will go up, each with his own reserve of strength, which only he truly knows. The group leaves camp in the dark. Ahead lies the steep snow of the upper mountain, where every movement costs more than it does lower down. At that altitude, a man takes a few steps and stops to catch his breath, then a few steps more. A distance you would cover in an hour in the Alps takes half a day here. The first to turn around are Oscar Cadillac and Patsy Gonyi at roughly 7,000 meters. Both are experienced, both understand exactly what happens to the body on the way up, and both decide they are going no further. They head down, back towards base camp. 5 carry on, and that is when the weather starts to break. The wind picks up, visibility drops, the slope slowly loses its shape. Moving gets harder, the group's pace falls off. What by the plan should have taken a certain amount of time takes more. The gaps between people stretch out, the strong pull ahead, the rest hold on as best they can. On an 8,000er, there is no commander to give the order to turn back. There is a general agreement, and there is each man's own decision. You judge for yourself how much you have left. You count the hours to darkness yourself. You work out for yourself whether there is enough for the way home. A mistake in that calculation cannot be fixed by anything. By the middle of the day, the group comes up to the last section. There is not much left. Horizontally, almost nothing. Vertically, a little over 100 meters. Here, 5 people will divide into 2 parts, and that division will turn out to be final. Alfredo Garcia and David Lopez stop. About 100 vertical meters remain to the top, and they decide they are going no further. They give 2 reasons: accumulated fatigue and the changing weather. From the outside, it looks almost absurd. 100 meters, a distance you would walk in a city in a minute without giving it a thought. Here it means roughly an hour of hard work upwards, and then that same hour has to be paid back on the way down, already empty. The 2 of them count what they have left and see it clearly. Enough for the climb, questionable for the descent. The mountain does not accept half calculations. Either you come back or you do not. Turning around at a point like that is the hardest decision in climbing. Not because it is dangerous, but because there is no glory in it. A man has spent months of preparation, money, his holiday, weeks of acclimatization, has reached the mark from which the summit is already in sight, and he turns his back. Nobody puts that in a headline. Garcia would later say it plainly. That refusal is what kept him alive. Xavi Gomez, Alvaro Paredes, and Abel Alonso make a different decision. They go on. At that moment, the group breaks apart for good into 2 stories. 2 men who will come home and then spend the rest of their lives thinking about 1 point on a slope, and 3 who will climb higher than any of them and stay on the mountain for good. The difference between those 2 stories is about an hour of climbing. In the afternoon of the 21st of July, 3 Spaniards are standing on the summit of Gasherbrum 1, 8,080 meters, the 11th highest mountain on the planet. For Paredes, it is a second 8,000er after Cho Oyu. For Gomez, 1 more line in a long list. From the summit, they make a satellite call. They report that they are up, that everything is fine, and they name the next point of contact. We will call from Camp 2. An ordinary phrase, a technical one, the kind said hundreds of times over an expedition. Nobody makes a point of remembering phrases like that. Down below, the news is taken calmly. There is one more detail working in the same direction. The group's personal locator beacon stays unactivated. The device you switch on in an emergency is silent, so there is no emergency. So the men are coming down under their own power. That is exactly how it is read at base camp and in Spain. The same day the news goes around the Spanish mountain websites as the good story of the season. The summit is taken, 3 men on top. The article about the ascent goes out while the 3 are still descending. And on the mountain by this time, the weather is not what it was in the morning. The upper part of the slope is closing in. The wind is working harder and harder. The descent begins later than it should have. The group reached the summit in the afternoon, which means little daylight is left for the way back. Ahead of them lie the couloir, darkness, and a kilometer down. No call comes from Camp 2. At first, this alarms nobody. At altitude, everything takes longer than planned. Batteries die in the cold. People collapse into a tent and fall asleep without reaching the phone. The evening passes, the night passes, the silence goes on. It will become clear later that the three spent the night of the 21st to the 22nd of July not in a tent, but out on the route, in a snowstorm, wind, snow, zero visibility. In conditions like that, the slope turns into a white nothing, with no up, no down, no landmarks. Tracks are covered over in minutes. A man who knew exactly where he stood an hour ago stops knowing it. On the 22nd of July, Xavi Gomez gets in touch a second time. This conversation is a different one. He reports difficulties, the main thing that follows from his words. On the descent, they have lost their bearings. They have not fallen ill. They have lost the way. They do not know where they are, and they cannot get to their tents. The three never reach Camp 3 at 7,200 meters. They are sitting somewhere on the slope, above 7,000 with no tent, into their second day on the move, in a storm. After that call, contact breaks off for good. At base camp, they begin counting the hours since the last contact. While there is silence up high, a second story is unfolding lower on the slope. The story of the two who stopped 100 meters short of the goal. After turning back, David Lopez descends the route and reaches Camp 1. For Alfredo Garcia, it works out harder. On the way down, he loses his bearings. The same storm, the same white slope without a single feature. He cannot find Camp 3. The tents are somewhere close by, but at 7,200 meters, somewhere close by, means they are not there at all. Garcia does something that would not occur to everyone. He rings Spain and asks them to read out his own coordinates from GPS. A man standing on the slope of an 8,000er learns his own position from the other hemisphere, by satellite, by voice. He gets the coordinates, but there is no time and no strength left to reach the tents. He spends the night in the open above 7,200 meters, without a tent. Gusts of wind in that area reach 100 kilometers an hour. In the morning, Garcia finds the camp and carries on down. On the descent, he is helped by the Argentine climber Mariano Galvan. All told, he will spend 4 nights on the slope above the 7,200 mark before he reaches base camp alive. 4 nights in a zone where a man does not recover, only spends himself. He got down. Down at base camp, by this point, they already understand that something serious has happened. Oscar Cadillac and Patsy Gonyi, the same two who turned around at 7,000 each, head back up. Not for the summit, to meet the men coming down and help them get in. But climbing to the upper camps does not work out. The weather on the mountain by now is critical. Low temperatures, driving snow, heavy snowfall, wind. Working in the possible search area is out of the question. Getting to the mark where the three were last is equally out of the question. People run into a wall of air and snow and cannot get through it. Alfredo Garcia, already down at base camp, joins in organizing the rescue effort. The man who spent 4 nights getting off the slope himself is helping to search for those who went above him. The expedition requests a helicopter search, but a helicopter in the Karakoram is not a taxi. A machine goes up only in a window when the cloud gives at least some kind of gap, and at these altitudes the air is so thin that every flight runs at the limit of what the aircraft can do. There is no window, the flights are put off. At base camp, they count the hours. Everyone understands one simple thing. The three have no tent, no sleeping bags, no stove. Waiting out weather that lasts this long is physically impossible. In Spain, the families wait for news that comes through the expedition organizers. Each new day cuts the chances. On the 26th of July, the count reaches 100 hours since the last contact. That day, a reconnaissance flight over the area where the three were last is finally possible. Helicopters pass over the slope. Nothing is found on the snow, no tracks, no equipment, no tent, no figures. The mountain looks empty. After the flight, the expedition takes the decision to end the search and rescue operation. The statement lists the grounds: extremely low temperatures, driving snow, an enormous amount of fresh snow, and the missing men's lack of the equipment needed to stay out on an open slope for that many days in a row. One conclusion follows from that list. Xavi Gomez, Alvaro Paredes, and Abel Alonso are declared dead. They were never found. They would not be found later either. All that remains of the final hours of the 3 Spaniards is a short conversation on the 22nd of July about having lost the way. The family of Abel Alonso issues a statement of its own, in which they speak of a fall on the descent, after the ascent made on Sunday the 21st of July. Reports from that period also state that the circumstances of the 3 deaths differed from one another. There is no precise information, and most likely there never will be. The only witnesses stayed on the slope. The expedition thanks everyone who took part in the search and asks that the family's privacy be respected. That is where the official part of the story ends. What begins is the part that concerns only those closest to them. In Valladolid, his colleagues decide to see Alvaro Paredes off in their own way, not with a minute of silence. On the 14th of August, at exactly midday, the sirens go on in fire stations all across Spain. A minute of noise instead of a minute of silence. Sirens and the horns of fire engines from Castile to the coast. That is how they say goodbye to a man who won the whole profession the right to retire earlier. In October of 2013, the climbing wall in Las Norias Park is given his name. The place where beginners first put their hands on the holds is now named after the man from Valladolid, who was the first in the city to climb an 8,000er. Later, the Valladolid Firefighters Sports Club sets up an annual bike ride, the Alvaro Paredes Memorial. The second edition draws around 300 riders. Alfredo Garcia comes home to Spain alive. In climbing circles, his case is discussed on its own, as an example of the right actions at great altitude. Turn around in time, judge soberly what is left in you, find a way to work out where you are when everything around you is white, and get yourself down. And Gasherbrum 1 remains what it always was, a mountain where the main losses come not on the way up, but on the way back. Hidden Peak shows itself only to those who have gone far enough. Not everyone comes down from it. On the 9th of March, 2012, 2 teams are working on Gasherbrum 1. At 8:30 in the morning, one of them reaches the summit and goes into the history books. The other is climbing the neighboring face at that same moment and vanishes without a trace. At 10:30, Gerfried Goeschl reports by satellite phone 450 meters to the summit. 3.5 hours later, a Spanish climber sees the 3 of them 250 meters below the top. Nobody sees them after that. 3 weeks of searching, helicopters over every face, and absolutely nothing. One mountain one day, 2 completely different outcomes. That same day, 3 men disappear on Gasherbrum 1. The Austrian Gerfried Goeschl, the Swiss Cedric Hahlen, and the Pakistani Nisar Hussain Sadpara climb up the face, make contact, and are never seen again. No bodies, no equipment, no tracks in the snow. The 3 of them are simply gone. Gasherbrum 1 stands in the Karakoram on the border between Pakistan and China and holds an altitude of 8,080 meters. In summer, dozens of expeditions come here. In winter, the mountain turns into a different place. The temperature drops so far that exposed skin stops registering pain within minutes, and the wind works the ridges around the clock without a break, without the usual lull at night. At that altitude in winter, there is no lull. Goeschl sets himself a task nobody had solved before him. Not one task, 3 at once, in a single push. The first winter ascent of this summit. A new route up the south face, meaning a line nobody had ever climbed, and a descent from the top by a different way, down the northwestern side. That third part is the heart of it. To go up by one road and come down by another on an 8,000er in winter means making the first winter traverse of an 8,000er in the history of mountaineering. Before March 2012, nobody had done it, and to jump ahead, nobody has done it since. Goeschl doesn't know this mountain from descriptions. In the summer of 2011, he had already stood on its summit and looked down on it from above. Both slopes, both possible lines. After that success, he announces his plan publicly, leaving himself no way back. 6 months later, he brings a new team to the foot of the mountain. In Liesen, a small town in the Austrian province of Steiermark, there is a man the locals know for something other than 8,000ers. To them, he's a school teacher. Gerfried Goeschl was born on the 3rd of October, 1972. A qualified secondary school teacher by training, he also worked as a counselor for young people and families. The sort of man teenagers and their parents come to with their problems. An ordinary profession. An ordinary life. He lives in Liesen with his wife Heike and their 2 daughters, and never moves away from that town. The other half of his biography looks different. Goeschl is a certified high-altitude instructor and an expedition leader for the Austrian Alpine Club. In 2002 and 2003, he climbs Cho Oyu and Gasherbrum 2 with his brother. The international name arrives in 2005, Everest without supplementary oxygen. That is another level entirely, and from that point, people start taking him seriously. But that isn't what he's remembered for. Goeschl has a habit that turns, over the years, into his trademark. On every 8,000er he climbs, he pulls a photograph of his wife and daughters out of his jacket and has his picture taken with it. The same image, shot on different summits around the world. A face wrapped in a hood, a beard caked with ice, and in his hands, a family photo. What he raises above 8,000 meters is not a flag, not a sponsor's logo, but his family. By the winter of 2012, he is 39. In a few months, he will turn 40. This is his best season as a climber, the summits behind him, the experience of leading, and a reputation as a man who knows when to turn around. That is exactly what makes the story harder to take. The man walking up to this mountain is not a reckless beginner, but a calculating professional who knows the price of every decision. The second man on the rope is 9 years younger, and he came to the mountains by a completely different road. Cedric Hahlen was born on the 19th of September, 1981, in the Swiss canton of Aargau. He starts climbing as a child in the Alps, which are literally outside his window. Between 1995 and 2003, he takes part in 16 competitions of the Swiss Alpine Club, a sporting education, discipline, technique, working for a result. Between expeditions, he earns his living with his hands. A landscape gardener, lawns, trees, stone, soil. In 2010, he starts training as a certified mountain guide. In 2011, he is taking tourists up Kilimanjaro. So by 30, he is only just formalizing the profession he has been living for years. And yet, his climbing record at 30 looks like it belongs to a man twice his age. In 2004, Hahlen climbs K2 and becomes the youngest European ever to stand on that summit. He is 22. On a mountain like that, even the experienced have no right to a mistake, and getting up it at that age means either enormous talent or enormous luck. Judging by everything that followed, with Hahlen it was the first. In 2006, together with Hans Mitterer and Uli Steck, he makes the first ascent of Gasherbrum 2 East from the Chinese side, one of the genuinely hard routes climbed in the Karakoram in those years. After that, Shishapangma, Broad Peak, Kangshenjunga, Aconcagua, 5 8,000ers across 11 expeditions, all of it before the age of 30. Against that record, Hahlen is a rare kind of partner, young but with a full set of big mountains behind him, including the very massif they are heading for. For Goeschl's plan, he is the ideal man, not someone catching up, an equal. The third member of the team grew up 3 days' walk from the foot of these mountains. Nisar Hussein's Sadpara came from the village of Sadpara near Skardu in Gilgit-Baltistan. For decades, this place has supplied high-altitude porters to the Baltoro Glacier, men who carry other people's loads to the foot of K2 and the Gasherbrums and stay off camera in other people's victories. His father was one of those porters. The son's road looked decided in advance. He leaves school after the first few years. After that, sheep, pastures, altitude as an everyday fact rather than an achievement. Reading and writing he has to learn later, in snatches, between jobs. In 1996, he goes to a real mountain for the first time. An army expedition to Siakangri, 7,422 meters. From there begins a career that ends in numbers which are hard to take in. 10 ascents of 5 Pakistani 8,000ers, Gasherbrum 1, Gasherbrum 2, Broad Peak, Nanga Parbat, K2, and all of them without supplementary oxygen. For a Pakistani climber, that is a record. About altitude, he used to say a strange thing that others repeated after him with surprise. The higher he climbed, the better, somehow, he felt. Where an ordinary person's body starts coming apart, his own, by his account, gains strength. And here is the thing that must not be blurred. On the 2012 expedition, Nisar is not there as a porter. He goes as a full member of the rope team, on equal terms with the Austrian and the Swiss, with the same share of the risk and the same right to the summit. For a Pakistani high-altitude climber of that era, this is an extremely rare position. Men like him were almost always hired, not invited. At home, he leaves 3 children. The state will later award him, posthumously, one of the country's highest honors, the Sitara-e-Imtiaz. But that comes afterwards, when there is no longer anyone to look for. A year earlier, this same mountain had already shown what it costs in winter. In the winter of 2011, Goeschl comes here with the Canadian Louis Rousseau and the Spaniard Alex Chacon. They occupy base camp on the 31st of January and stay on the mountain for more than 40 days. 40 days in the Karakoram in winter is not an expedition. It's a siege, where half the work goes on simply not freezing inside a tent. The first attempt goes up that same new line on the south face. It runs into rotten rock that crumbles in your hands and into an ice slope the team judges impassable. They retreat. The second attempt is fast, alpine style, up the classic Japanese couloir. It is stopped by wind of around 80 kilometers an hour. At that speed, the ground simply stops holding a person on a ridge. On the 15th of March, 2011, they come down with nothing. Another man would have closed the subject after that. Goeschl comes back exactly a year later with the same route plan and a new team. He drops none of the three objectives: the winter first ascent, the new line, the traverse. In the winter of 2012, there are two expeditions at the foot of the mountain at the same time, and that changes the whole situation. The Polish team is working the normal route. Its goal is simple and clear: the first winter ascent, no frills, by the proven road. Goeschl's international team goes its own way up the south face, planning to come down the opposite side. Formally, they are not rivals. Different lines, different objectives. In practice, both teams know that the first winter ascent will go to one of them, and that they share the same weather window. One mountain, two camps, one calendar. After that, March decides everything. On the 7th, Goeschl's three go up and settle into a camp at around 7,000 meters. This is already the zone where the body doesn't recover. Sleep gives no rest, food isn't absorbed. Every hour spent up there takes more out of a person than the body can put back. The March weather window is short. Both teams read the forecast the same way and understand that waiting is not an option. The Spaniard Alex Chacon stays lower, in a camp at somewhere around 6,800 meters. He is the one who will be the last to see the three of them alive. On the 9th of March, at 8:30 in the morning, local time, the Poles Adam Bilecki and Janusz Gołąb reach the summit of Gasherbrum 1. This is a historic moment. 8,080 meters in winter, on a mountain nobody had climbed in winter until that day. The first winter ascent has happened. Two Poles stand on the summit, record the fact, and immediately start down the normal route. Staying up there in winter is out of the question under any circumstances. That same morning, on the other side of the mountain, Goeschl's team is climbing its own line on the south face. They don't know what has happened. There is no contact of any kind between the two groups while they are on the route. Only altitude, snow, and the wall in front of their faces. Their route, a couloir and a ridge at the right-hand edge of the triangular rock face on the southwestern side, which at roughly 7,500 meters joins the American route. From there, a shared path to the summit and, as planned, a descent down the opposite side. Both teams are working on the same 8,000er on the same day, but on opposite sides of the ridge, and they never see each other. By evening, one of them will be back in camp with a victory. The other will not come back at all. 2 hours after the Polish summit, a satellite phone comes to life in Austria, 10:30 in the morning. Goeschl gets through to home and gives the figure that will later appear in every account. They are 450 meters from the summit, not horizontally, vertically. 450 meters of climbing, which at 8,000 meters can take 3 hours or 8, depending on the snow and on how much is left in you. His voice sounds exhausted. Everyone who heard the call says so, but the content of the message is calm and businesslike. Position, altitude, condition, intention to keep going. No alarm. By that point, the three of them have been climbing for about 7.5 hours straight. 3.5 hours pass. Alex Chacon, from the camp below, sees them on the face for the last time, 3 dots high above him. By his estimate, they are roughly 250 meters below the summit. That is the last thing known for certain. There is nothing after it. In those 3.5 hours between the call and the sighting, they had gained about 200 meters of altitude. Slow, but at that height in winter it's a normal pace. They were moving, alive, closer to the summit than to any shelter. And then the weather on the mountain turns. A storm comes in. Climbers who were descending the same mountain by other routes in those days described the conditions as brutal. Wind that knocks you off your feet, and visibility shrinking to arm's length. Nobody sees them again. Not that day, not the next, not a week later. The bad weather covers the mountain, and from that minute on, nothing more is known about the 3 men left on the face. While the storm rages on the mountain, something unfolds down below that has nothing to do with mountaineering at all. A helicopter is requested straight away, in the first hours after contact is lost. And it doesn't fly. The first reason is obvious and disputed by nobody. The weather is unflyable. A machine simply won't get up in conditions like that. But behind the weather, there turns out to be a second reason, and it's about money. A rescue flight in Pakistan is not free. For an aircraft to launch, the expedition's operator has to put down a deposit, $10,000. The operator doesn't pay it. Not because the money isn't there, but as a protest. Shortly before this, the airline had sharply raised its rates. The size of the deposit and the cost of an hour in the air had gone up several times over, and the tour operators considered that unacceptable. The argument over prices had been running for a while, but in those particular days it ended up standing directly in the path of a rescue operation. What moves things is diplomacy. The guarantee for the flight is given by the Austrian embassy in Islamabad. At the same time, the embassy keeps in touch with everyone at once, the families in Austria and Switzerland, the Pakistani operator, the country's Alpine Club, and the military, who are asked to provide the aircraft. Only after that guarantee is the question closed. The arithmetic is unforgiving. Contact was lost on the 9th of March. While the money was being settled and the weather was being waited out, almost a week went by. Above 7,500 meters in winter, a person with no tent, no stove, and no food supply does not live for a week. They live for hours. By the time the rotors finally started turning, this was no longer about rescue. It was about finding anything at all. A tent, a rucksack, any object that would stand out against the snow. One single clue that might explain what happened over those last 250 meters. The sky clears on the 15th, and the military put their machines in the air. The flights go at around 7,000 meters. The pilots follow the new line on the south face, the one the 3 men had been climbing, then along the normal route, through the Japanese couloir, in case they did get over the summit and start down the far side, as they had planned. They cover every possible wall and slope a helicopter can reach in winter. They find nothing, not an object, not a scrap of equipment, not a cut rope. Clean snow and clean ice from the foot to the ridge. Having flown their allotted time, the crews turn back to base. That same day, Wolfgang Goeschl, Gerfried's brother, lands in Skardu. He comes to take part in the search and arrives at exactly the moment the search ends. The operation is overseen by Colonel Manzoor Ahmed, president of the Alpine Club of Pakistan. His wording is dry and final. Army helicopters made another attempt when the weather improved and saw no one. There is no hope left. Nobody can spend that long up there. The search is officially called off, but the families don't accept it. Cedric Hahlen's relatives push for one more flight. On the 31st of March, 3 weeks after the disappearance. Formally, there is no chance whatsoever of finding anyone alive, and everyone understands that. It is about something else, seeing anything at all that would let them close the story. That flight, too, turns up nothing. 3 weeks, several aircraft, every accessible slope on 2 routes, and again, nothing. Not a single item was ever found. In mountaineering this happens, but each time it leaves the same question behind. Where exactly did their climb end, and on which side of the ridge did they stay? The official conclusion fits into a single line. The 3 of them were caught by a powerful wind and blown off the ridge. The most likely direction is the Chinese side. Gasherbrum 1 stands on the border, and the northeastern slopes run down into territory where Pakistani helicopters do not fly at all. If they were carried that way, there was nowhere to search and nobody to do it. That version explains the strangest part of the story, the complete absence of any trace on every face that was searched. And there remains a question that will never be answered. Nobody knows whether they reached the summit or not. Between Chicon's last sighting and the top, there were about 250 meters left. It is possible they covered them and were caught by the wind already on the way down, having completed the first part of the plan. It is possible they never got there. The difference is enormous for the history of mountaineering, and it means absolutely nothing to 3 families. In July 2012, Cedric Hahlen's parents travel to the foot of K2 and fix a memorial plaque to the Gilkey Memorial, the cairn of stones, where, for decades, people have attached the names of those who never came back from the mountains of the Karakoram. The names of all three end up on that stone, beside dozens of others. Nisar Hussein Sadpara receives the Sitara-i-Imtiaz posthumously. The son of a porter from the village of Sadpara becomes a national hero in a country where he started out as a shepherd. From the footage shot on the expedition itself, a documentary film is released later called The Last Journey. The first winter ascent of Gasherbrum 1 went to the poles. Their names are in the reference books, the date the 9th of March, 2012, the time 8:30 in the morning. On the same day, on the same mountain, a few hundred meters off to the side, 3 men were going after a different line in those books. The winter traverse of an 8,000er has still not been done. The 5th of July, 2022. Gasherbrum. 8,035 meters. A mountain people call the most accessible 8,000er in the world. The Pakistani guide Iman Karim walks out of base camp alone and never comes back. To this day, nobody knows what actually happened, a crevasse or a glacial meltwater channel, and nobody even knows where, on the mountain or already down below, on the glacier. A few weeks later, his name will turn up on a list of the dead on a completely different peak. This is the story of a man who was lost twice. In northern Pakistan, in the Hunza Valley, there's a place you simply couldn't drive to until 2003, Shimshal. About 2,000 people speaking Wakhi, a village sitting at roughly 3,100 meters. There was no road at all, only a trail, several days on foot to the nearest settlement. No electricity in any normal sense, no gas, no heating. Winter here is long, summer is short, and everything that has to get done in a year has to fit into that narrow, warm window. It's in that window that the people of Shimshal take their livestock up to the high pastures. This is not a stroll. The journeys take days. They cross glaciers and passes, and everyone takes part. Men, women, teenagers. Someone from Shimshal learns to move on ice before most people ever find out what a glacier even looks like. By the time he's a grown man, he has more hours on moraine and among crevasses than some European climber logs in an entire career. Out of that arithmetic grew a phenomenon Pakistanis describe very simply: the Valley of Climbers. A village of 2,000 people has given the country a wildly disproportionate share of its high-altitude workers, its porters, and its guides. Not because the lungs here are special, or the blood. Because here the mountains are a place of work, not a place for heroics. In 2008, a mountaineering school opened in Shimshal, the first in Pakistan. From the very start, it had a separate program for women, for the ones who had spent generations looking up at these summits without any right to climb them. In Shimshal, people talk about climbing without grand words. It isn't a sport and it isn't a hobby. It's ordinary work, continued higher up and paid for. This is where Iman Karim came from. A Pakistani's career in the big mountains is built as a hard ladder. At the bottom, the porter. His job is simple and merciless. Carry a load from the road up to base camp. 30-odd kilograms on a wooden frame, loose rock, glacier, sometimes 8 hours a day. Some of these men walk in ordinary shoes rather than mountain boots, and in cast-off gear that foreigners left behind after an expedition. The next step up is the high-altitude worker. He goes above base camp, carrying equipment, pitching tents, fixing ropes. The top step is the guide. Now he carries both the loads and the people, all of the responsibility at once. Iman Karim went all the way up that ladder. By the early 20s, he was known as an experienced guide, a veteran of many expeditions, and, more telling for his reputation, as a man you call when there's a rescue on. In the mountains, that's a category of its own. A rescuer walks toward the place everyone else is leaving, with no guarantee he'll get there in time, and almost always without extra pay that matches the risk. Now, about money, because the picture isn't complete without it. A Pakistani high-altitude worker earns somewhere around $2,000 to $3,000 for a full season. A Sherpa brought in for the same expedition costs the organizers $15,000 to $20,000. A Western guide, $20,000 to $30,000, and often he's arriving at a mountain he's seeing for the first time in his life, while the local man has been walking on it for 10 years. Insurance completes the structure. The Gilgit-Baltistan government program covers a local porter for something like $700. A single helicopter rescue costs many times that. For a long time, Pakistanis weren't counted as full guides at all. They were taken on for the heavy work and left below for the summit push. Other people went up. The 2022 season broke every previous number. Around 400 climbing permits were issued for K2. For comparison, in a busy year by that mountain's standards, there might be about 100, a fourfold rise in the space of a few seasons. K2 wasn't the only mountain under load. Expeditions were working at the same time on Broad Peak, on both Gasherbrums, on Nanga Parbat. The Karakoram, which for decades had stayed the quiet alternative to the Himalaya, was suddenly overcrowded. The local staff felt it first. Demand for high-altitude workers grew faster than a new generation of trained people could appear. There simply weren't enough men who know how to work on an 8,000er to go round every team at once. An experienced guide with a reputation became a scarce resource, and his schedule got packed to the limit. July's weather added its own share. The windows were short and ragged, the schedules compressed, and teams had to move when the forecast allowed, rather than when the people were ready. Resources, attention, and rescue capacity were stretched across several peaks, standing a day's travel apart. The result of that arithmetic showed up very quickly. By the 5th of July, the season had already produced 2 deaths in a single day on different mountains. 2 more were listed as missing on Nanga Parbat. And here comes a detail without which none of what follows makes sense. Communications in the Karakoram worked in fits and starts. Satellite terminals and mobile networks came and went. Information reached the outside world in fragments, through acquaintances, through the local press, through posts on social media. The big outlets couldn't confirm their own stories fast enough. In that mode, fact and rumor travel at exactly the same speed, and afterwards, telling them apart can be impossible. 8,035 meters. The 13th highest mountain on Earth, standing in the Gasherbrum Massif on the border of Pakistan and China. In guidebooks and in the catalogs of expedition companies, Gasherbrum 2 comes with the same label every time, the most accessible 8,000er. The southwest ridge is technically straightforward, and the success rate has traditionally been high. That reputation is what makes the mountain popular, and it's also due its central lie. The walk into base camp runs 120 to 130 kilometers along the Baltoro Glacier. The camp itself sits on the moraine of the Abruzzi Glacier at around 5,000 meters. As a rule, you can't even see the summit from there, and then begins the section that rarely makes it into the brochures. Between base camp and camp, one lies a broken glacier. People who have crossed it in different years compare that stretch to the Khumbu Icefall on Everest, the most famous trap in world mountaineering. Seracs hang over the route, towers of ice that break away from the neighboring peaks of the massif without warning. Underfoot, a network of crevasses covered by snow bridges. There's a simple rule about those bridges that everyone who has worked there repeats. You have to go early. The cold of the night holds the plug of snow above the void, and you can walk across it. By 9 in the morning, the sun has done its work. The bridge softens, and the very same surface a team walked over 3 hours earlier turns into a lid with nothing underneath it. There's a second rule, less obvious. In summer, streams of meltwater run inside the glacier. During the day, they gain strength and disappear into channels beneath the surface of the ice, narrow passages with no way out of them. So it turns out that on the easiest 8,000er in the world, the most dangerous part of the job isn't the summit, it's the road to it. In early July of 2022, Iman Karim was working on an expedition on Gasherbrum 2. Among the team, reports named the Pakistani climbers Zarbaz Khan and Rana Javed. The clients in those days were acclimatizing. It's a mandatory stage. Without it, going to 8,000 meters is physiologically impossible. The body has to be taught the thin air gradually, and there's only one known way to do it. Repeated ascents and descents. The team climbs to Camp 1, sleeps there, comes back down, then goes higher, sleeps again, comes down again. That repeats for weeks. The routine looks like routine, and there really is no drama in it, but it has a hidden arithmetic that very few people ever think about. Every acclimatization cycle is one more passage across that same broken glacier, up and back. Over an expedition, a client crosses it a few times. A guide and a high-altitude worker cross it many times more. They go out earlier to check the way. They come back to bring up loads. They go again to take the next group through. A guide's work at this stage is made of things that are almost invisible from the outside. marking the route, testing snow bridges for strength, ferrying food and gear up to the higher camps, shepherding people whose reactions slow down at altitude. It's on this stretch, not on the ridge, not near the summit, but on the approach glacier, that the bulk of the local staff's working hours are concentrated. While the clients rest at base camp between rotations, the guides and the porters keep walking. No emergency of any kind had been recorded in the group at that point. The expedition was on schedule. On the 5th of July, 2022, the news of the Pakistani guide's death appeared in the local outlet, Pamir Times. From there, it spread to international sites. The same day, with an explicit caveat, the details are unclear. There isn't much in that report, and every word in it carries weight. He left base camp alone. That's exactly how the sources put it. A solo departure from base camp. No stated purpose, no description of a route, no time. Why an experienced guide who knew that Glacier set off without a partner is not explained anywhere. There could have been a dozen reasons for going out. To check a section, to deal with some practical task, any number of things. Not one of them is confirmed, and there is nothing here worth guessing at. What matters is something else. Moving alone across a broken glacier means there is no rope team. A rope between two people is the only real protection against a crevasse. It doesn't keep you from breaking through, but it keeps you from going the full depth. Your partner holds the weight and pulls you out. A man without a partner has none of that chance. For someone on his own, a fall into a crevasse leaves neither a jolt that anyone could feel, nor a witness who could see it. And, which matters especially on a glacier, nobody will know the exact point to search. A track in the snow gets covered by snow. He is reported to have fallen into a crevasse. The exact time of the incident has never been established. All that's known is the date it became known. No public examination of the case ever appeared, not then and not later. No report with a reconstruction, no official finding, not even a line in the databases where circumstances are normally recorded. The main version is a fall into a crevasse. It's repeated in most of the reports, and it looks the most likely, given where he was. But there is a second one. Some of the sources speak of a death in a glacial meltwater channel near base camp. That isn't a small thing, and it isn't a rewording. It's a different event. The same channel under the ice that gathers strength toward midday. Only the outcome is different. A person isn't pulled downward. He's carried sideways, into a place there's no getting back out of. And then, a detail that makes this story genuinely unusual. Even the place has not been established. Did it happen on the mountain itself, or already down below, on the approach glacier? In the reports from the time, that uncertainty is written out in plain words. It is unclear whether it all happened on the mountain or on the Gasherbrum glacier, which is badly broken up and especially treacherous in warm weather. There were no witnesses. Whatever reconstruction there was had to be built from indirect signs, from where the man set out, when he was missed, and what was known about the state of the ice in those days. That isn't enough to claim anything seriously. The data is contradictory, and neither version has ever been confirmed. Usually in a mountain tragedy, it's the cause that stays unknown. Why he fell, why he didn't turn back, why he didn't make it. Here the geography is unknown as well. Not just how, but where. Within roughly the same day, around the 5th of July, another Pakistani died on Broad Peak, Sharif Sadpara, 34 years old, a K2 summiteer from the year before. His case is described in detail, a fall on the summit ridge at about 8,020 meters in very heavy weather. 2 deaths, 2 countrymen, 2 neighboring peaks, one in the same day. In a newsfeed where all of it was coming out jumbled and with the connection dropping, those reports laid over one another. Sometime later, a line appeared in a summary review of fatalities on Broad Peak. In July of 2022, it said, "The Pakistanis Sharif Sadpara and Imran Karim died here." Along with the surname, a detail moved across as well. A fall into a crevasse after a solo departure from base camp. That description belongs to a different event. It's about Gasherbrum 2, a mountain a day's travel across the glacier from Broad Peak. The very circumstance that made that story distinctive ended up stitched onto someone else's summit. The name changed too. Iman became Imran, one letter, easier on the ear, and the man became a slightly different man. After that, the ordinary mechanics of the internet took over. A large specialist site is a source people cite. The line began to be quoted, reprinted, pulled into aggregators and lists. The mistake stopped being somebody's typo and acquired the status of a verified fact. And so, the Pakistani guide ended up recorded on the wrong mountain, under the wrong name, in someone else's row of the dead. No correction ever appeared in the original summary. He was lost twice, first on the ice, then in the archive. There's one more thing that makes this tangle hard to unpick, and it's purely a matter of language. The surname Karim is very common in Pakistani mountaineering, and over a short span of time, it belonged to three notable people at once. Mehriban Karim, also from Shimshal, died on K2 in August of 2008, in one of the worst disasters in that mountain's history. He was known by the nickname Karim the Dream. The legendary porter who went into the history books as Little Karim died of illness in April of 2022, 3 months before the events on Gasherbrum. And the third is Iman Karim, July of that same 2022. 3 different lives, 3 different mountains, 3 different causes. In popular retellings, they get mixed together over and over, and the only way to untangle them is by the dates. The story on Gasherbrum 2 has an unexpected sequel, or rather, the absence of one. Iman Karim's death remains the last-named fatality on that mountain. Since 2022, no new recorded cases have appeared there. And in 2025, nobody climbed Gasherbrum 2 at all. One expedition after another called off its attempt. Deep snow, unsettled weather, windows that closed. The leader of one of the teams summed the season up without softening it. The mountain would stay unclimbed that year. The most accessible 8,000er in the world had shown for a second time what its reputation is worth. Of a Pakistani guide from a village where the mountains are counted as work, one line remains in the open sources. And in that line, the wrong name, set beside someone else's summit. In 2008, a man climbs onto the Baltoro Glacier who has already been here twice before. Jean-Noel Urban, 49 years old, a ski mountaineer from Marseille. 2 years earlier, he walked out of this same base camp, climbed the neighboring 8,000er, and skied down from its summit. Now the goal is different, and higher. Gasherbrum 1, 8,080 meters. What will happen to him on the way back down? Right here at the foot of the mountain, nobody knows yet. And the place to start isn't this summer. It's his first trip here, 10 years earlier. In the summer of 1998, 3 Frenchmen walk up to the Gasherbrum base camp. One of them is Jean-Noel Urban. Back home in the French Alps, people already know his name. But here in the Karakoram, he's a newcomer. The team's objective is an unusual one. Not an 8,000er, but a wall that stands directly above the camp. The south side of Gasherbrum 6, 7,003 meters. It isn't an 8,000er at all. It's a 7,000er of the same mountain knot, the younger neighbor of the famous summits. The mountain doesn't make anybody's list of the great peaks, but it rises above the tents almost vertically, and from up there you can see the entire glacial cirque. The plan has urban signature all over it. Climb the wall, then ski back down it. In the late 90s, in the Karakoram, that's close to science fiction. The climb up the wall goes well. The team reaches roughly 6,900 meters, the upper third of the route, the point where the descent starts to look real. And there it all comes apart. A small avalanche runs down the slope and catches one of the 3, Nicolas Bonhomme. He doesn't come back off the mountain. The expedition folds the same day. The 2 who were left strip their gear and walk down to those same tents, the ones the wall hangs over. From there, from the shared Gasherbrum base camp, they go home without a summit and without their teammate. For Urban, this is his first loss in the mountains, but not his last trip here. Ahead of him lie 10 more years of work in the Alps and 2 returns to this same cirque. The second one will hand him the greatest success of his career. The third will be his last. Marseille is a port city in the south of France with no glaciers, no altitude, and no avalanches. Just the sea, stone, and sun. That's where the man was born who would one day haul a pair of skis up a 7,000-meter wall in the Karakoram. Urban moves to the mountains on his own, and he stays in them for good. He spends the last 30 years of his life in the Serre Chevalier area, near Briançon, in the French Alps, in a valley that lives on skiing all year round. This is where he becomes the man people will know him as. Not a classic mountaineer, but a specialist in extreme skiing. The difference matters. An ordinary climber goes up on foot and comes down on foot. Someone like Urban goes up on foot and rides down a slope, where a normal skier simply couldn't stay upright. 50 degrees of steepness, the slope drops away under your boots, and it's easier to reach out and touch it with your hand than to look down at it. 60 degrees is nearly a vertical drop. Urban has more than 100 lines of that steepness to his name. A mistake on them doesn't end with a fall on your side. A person slides all the way to the bottom of the slope. And yet, in conversation, he never sounds like a man chasing records. He puts his motivation in very plain terms. What counts isn't the achievement, it's the time spent in the mountains, the mountain itself, nature itself, not the result, the way of moving. He runs his own expedition website, writes his own reports and posts his own photographs. Salewa and Dynafit France back him. He's part of their adventure ski program. In the community, people describe him as a modest man. An alpine slope and a slope at 8,000 meters are physically different things, even when the angle is the same. In his early 40s, Urban takes a step very few people are willing to take. He carries his style from the Alps to the highest mountains on the planet. 2005 is his turning point. First, Cho Oyu, 8,188 meters, one of the more accessible summits above 8,000. Urban climbs it and skis down the northwest face. That same season, he's working on Shishapangma, 8,013 meters, on the southwest wall, along the line of the Scott route. What he does there counts as a partial first ski descent, a line nobody had skied before him. The skis make nothing easier. They have to be carried up on your back, and the descent happens at 8,000 meters, where there's a third of the oxygen you're used to, and, on that kind of angle, no protection at all. After 2005, Urban's name joins the short list of Frenchmen who don't just climb 8,000ers, but genuinely ski down them. In the summer of 2006, Urban is walking that familiar glacier in the Karakoram again. 8 years have passed since the Gasherbrum 6 expedition, and he's coming back to the same cirque, the same tents. Only now the objective is different. Gasherbrum 2, 8,035 meters, the second highest summit of this knot. His rope partner is Nicola Brun, a man he'll keep working with from here on. On the 10th of July, they reach the summit. And this is where Urban does the thing he came for. He clips into his skis right at the top and starts skiing from the highest point. He rides all the way down to Camp 3, on the flank of an 8,000er, where a single wrong move doesn't get a second chance. This time, there are no incidents. A few days after the ascent, a depression moves into the Baltoro region, and the bad weather holds for around 5 days. If they'd been slower getting out, there might have been no window at all. That same year shows the other side of Urban. In the autumn, he's working on Manaslu, 8,163 meters on the northeast face. He doesn't reach the top. He picks up an infection and turns around. No trying to tough it out, no pushing on out of stubbornness, no attempt to salvage the money and the months of preparation. He turned around and walked down. It's episodes like that one that get him described in the community as a man who knows how to stop. Behind him are more than 100 extreme descents and 2 8,000ers skied, and not a single story about reckless risk. Gasherbrum, too, becomes the biggest success of his career, and the following season, he aims higher still. The plan for 2007 sounds almost impossible. 3 8,000ers on skis in a single calendar year. For a man who climbs every summit on his own legs and hauls his ski gear up with him, that's a program right at the limit. In the spring, he goes to Everest with a Monaco expedition by the northeast ridge from the Tibetan side. The idea is the first complete ski descent of the Norton Couloir, the narrow gully that cuts through the north face. The attempt is scheduled for the 16th and 17th of May. The descent ends up partial. The state of the snow on the slope won't let him ride the line in one piece. Urban comes down, but not the way he planned. In the summer, he moves on to Pakistan, to Nanga Parbat, 8,125 meters on the Kinchhofer route from the Diamir Valley. By his own reports, the team gets to roughly 7,400 meters and turns back. The accounts here contradict each other. Parts of the press later wrote about a completed ski descent from that mountain, but he himself never claimed one. Getting back out is long and heavy work. The high camps have to be taken down. Everything carried up has to be brought back. There are rappels down the fixed lines, and then a crossing of the glacier already in the dark. The work nobody puts in the reports, and nobody writes headlines about. The year closes without a single clean result out of the 3 he planned. Not one summit skied in full, not one finished line. And Urban doesn't walk away from the mountains, and he doesn't change his approach. He simply pushes the task to the following summer, and the following summer he doesn't pick a new mountain. He picks the one he has already stood beneath twice. In June of 2008, the caravan is once again strung out along the Baltoro Glacier, through Concordia, toward the foot of the Gasherbrums. The road is familiar down to the smallest detail. Urban is 49 years old, and this is his 3rd arrival in this cirque in 10 years. The objective is Gasherbrum 1, 8,080 meters, the highest point of the whole knot, also known as Hidden Peak. The partner is the same one as 2 years ago, Nicola Brun. The plan is the old one, and a well-practiced one. Climb to the summit and ski down from it. And here there's one detail that makes this story what it is. Gasherbrum 1 and Gasherbrum 2 share a base camp and share the same approach along the glacier. From one and the same tent, you can walk out to the right or to the left, and end up on 2 different 8,000ers. Urban arrives here as the only man who has already skied down the neighboring summit and is now taking on the higher one. He knows this patch of ground better than almost anyone standing on it. He saw it in '98 when he left without his teammate. He saw it in 2006 when he came back with a win. The glacier, the tents, the view of the walls, all of it exactly the same. The cycle starts in the standard way. Acclimatization first, up to Camp 1, up to Camp 2, a night, back down again. The body has to get used to the altitude, otherwise at 8,000 meters it will simply quit. These shuttle runs up and down take weeks and count as the most routine, most boring part of any expedition. It's on exactly that kind of routine run that everything will end. The lower part of the route on Gasherbrum 1 is a long glacial plateau between the camps. On the face of it, it's the calmest place in the whole expedition, nearly flat, no walls, no drops, easy walking. This is the stretch climbers cross over and over, up and down, while they build their acclimatization. The deception is that a glacier isn't solid ground. It's a slowly flowing river of ice, and where it bends, it tears. Crevasses open in the body of the glacier, some of them narrow, some as wide as a room, and tens of meters deep. Snow drifts over the top of them. That gives you a bridge, just a layer of snow stretched over empty space, and from the outside, it looks like every other part of the field. The strength of a bridge like that changes from hour to hour. At night and in the early morning, the snow is locked up by the frost and it holds a person. In the daytime, under the sun, it loosens and sags. In June, at the height of the season, the bridges work noticeably worse than they did at the start of it. The snow has already settled, thawed, and lost its bonds. The rule for that kind of terrain is to move rope together. But on the way down after a night out, close to camp, the pace usually slips into something more relaxed. The tents are near, and your attention is already home. The glacier doesn't make an allowance for the fact that a person has walked this way 5 times already. It simply holds the snow lid up right until the moment it stops holding. The 18th of June, 2008, around 5 in the morning. Urban and Brun leave Camp 2 and start down toward base camp. The timing is well chosen, on cold morning snow before the sun comes up and softens the surface. That's how everyone moves who understands how a glacier works. The ground under them is familiar. They had already come up this way on the way to the top. It's part of the ordinary acclimatization cycle, and they aren't expecting any surprises from it. There isn't far to go to the tents. Behind them, a night at altitude. Ahead of them, rest before the decisive push for the summit. On one of the snow bridges, the covering suddenly gives way under Urban. He goes down into a crevasse that Brun would later describe with a single word: enormous. Reaching him on the spot proves impossible. A rescue from a glacial crevasse works in one case, when a person is hanging on the rope in the first few meters and can be pulled straight back up. If the fall is deep, there's almost nothing you can do from below. The walls close in, the bottom is out of reach, and any work in that narrow slot puts the rescuers themselves in danger. His partner is left alone in the middle of a glacial plateau, at the edge of a rift that the man walking beside him has just disappeared into. By Brun's assessment, the size of the crevasse left no chance of helping him, and no chance even of recovering his body. Jean-Noel Urban is 49 years old. He skied down from Cho Oyu, from Shishapangma, from the summit of Gasherbrum 2. He came down more than 100 slopes at close to 60 degrees, with no rope at all, where a mistake costs you your life. He knew how to turn around 2 steps from his goal when he felt that going on was wrong. His life in the mountains ends on flat ground, on a gentle stretch he had already crossed on this very expedition, a couple of hours from his own tent. A helicopter working in the Gasherbrum area is brought into the search. It doesn't work for long. On the 19th of June, the day after the accident, the search operation is officially called off. Bringing a body up out of a rift that deep is impossible, and everyone standing on that glacier understands it. Jean-Noel Urban stays in the glacier of Gasherbrum 1. The mountain he came for was never climbed by him. He didn't reach the summit, the ski descent never happened. The expedition ended on an acclimatization run. In France, they write about him as a ski mountaineer outside the norm, the man who took extreme skiing above 8,000 meters. Salewa and Dynafit France lose one of the key people in their high-altitude program. His expedition website, where for years he published his own reports and photographs himself, stays open for a while longer and turns into a memorial page. There's one turn left in this story that's hard to fit in your head. Gasherbrum 1 and Gasherbrum 2 stand side by side and use a shared camp. 2 years earlier, Urban walked out of those tents in one direction, climbed to 8,035 meters, clipped into his skis right on the summit, and rode down a slope where the price of a mistake is higher than on any route in the Alps. Everything came together. In 2008, he walked out of those same tents in the other direction. And he didn't come back from a gentle glacier where nobody expects trouble. He came to this cirque 3 times. In '98, in 2006, and in 2008. The first time, his teammate died here. The second time, he came down with the greatest success of his career. The third time, he died himself. The summer of 1982 in the Karakoram goes to plan for absolutely no one. The weather wrecks one expedition schedule after another. The windows of good visibility are short. The snowfalls drag on for days, and the wind on the ridges makes it impossible to work above 7,000. Later, the reports of the American Alpine Club will tie the tragedies of that season directly to unusually bad conditions. Not to mistakes, not to ambition, to weather that simply refuses to let anyone through. The first blow lands in May. On the 16th, an avalanche on Broad Peak catches Hans Frick, the leader of the expedition, an Austrian by birth who had spent many years living in Canada. His team packs up and walks off the mountain. There are 6 weeks left until July, and in those 6 weeks new groups arrive in the region, groups that already know what happened. Their objective is Gasherbrum 2, 8,035 meters. Here everything comes down to altitude and to the body's ability to tolerate it. That is exactly why Gasherbrum 2 draws more than just sportsmen. Teams come here with scientific goals, people who need not so much the summit as the chance to work at great height. In the summer of 1982, several groups are on the slopes of the mountain at the same time, and one of them has come from Germany. There are doctors in its ranks. Within a few weeks, the route of that expedition will cross paths with a far more famous climb. But by then, it will no longer be crossing paths with living men. At the head of the German expedition stands Dr. Gerd Brunner, a West German citizen connected with the University of Mainz. He is not a tourist and not an accidental presence in the mountains. The expedition under his command is built around a research program. Just how broad that program was, the available sources do not describe in any detail. All that is known is that the group's interest in high altitude was not purely sporting. Beside him walks the Austrian Norbert Wolf, also a doctor. He was born in 1951, which means that in the summer of 1982, he is just past 30. About his life outside this expedition, painfully little has survived. The Austrian climbing database keeps his record almost empty. And to this day, it carries a note saying that not even a photograph could be found. A man the entire climbing world would end up talking about was left without a face. The choice of mountain makes sense for a team like this. Gasherbrum. 2 offers exactly what doctors need. Serious altitude without the need to solve difficult technical problems. But that simplicity has a price, and everyone pays it. Above 7,000 meters, the human body stops recovering. It does not rest in sleep. It does not properly absorb food. It does not repair small failures. Every day up there is a withdrawal from a reserve that cannot be topped up. The medics moving along the ridge understand this better than anyone. In effect, they are studying a process that is running inside their own bodies at that very moment. Through the first weeks of July, the group works its way up the route in bad weather, setting camps higher and higher. On the 10th of July, 2 of them break away from the rest and head upward as a pair. They are seen at around 7,680 meters. That is already the upper part of the route, with less than 400 meters of height left to the summit. By the standards of Gasherbrum 2, this is the home stretch. 2 doctors moving together on one rope, and at that moment, everything is still fine with them. No one sees them again. What follows is the thing that reports mark with a dry line. Last seen. The weather on the route turns sharply worse in those days. Up high, it stops being clear where up is, where down is, where the track you left an hour ago is gone. The others waiting below wait for a return, then wait at least for a signal, then stop waiting. The Austrian climbing database gives the 11th of July, 1982, as the date of Norbert Wolf's death. The following day, that is. What happened between the moment the 2 were seen alive and the moment everything stopped, there is no data. No notes, no witnesses, no radio contact. Whether they reached the summit, whether they turned back, whether they became separated, unknown. No record of the event has survived. The team cannot climb higher and mount a proper search. This is not an alpine valley where a helicopter arrives in 20 minutes. Here, to reach the place where the 2 disappeared, you have to climb into the same zone yourself, in the same weather, with the same worn-down body. The people in the camps have been living at altitude for weeks already, and they have nothing left for a push like that. The expedition is called off. The survivors go down. 2 men remain missing on Gasherbrum 2. About the fate of Gerd Brunner, nothing will be learned in the July, nor a year later, nor 40 years later. He is never found at all. The only thing anyone manages to find later is his gear. Lower down the route, part of his clothing and equipment turns up, scattered across a range of heights. The scatter itself tells specialists a great deal. The items do not lie in one heap, the way they would around a man who has stopped, but trailed downward. From this comes the official conclusion recorded in the reports. The expedition leader fell. He did not fall ill, did not stay in camp, did not lose his way in the fog. He fell. At what altitude this happened and what caused it, the documents do not specify. So, he remains lost somewhere on the flank of Gasherbrum 2, wherever he was carried, and not one of the later expeditions has come across him in all the decades since. In the Himalayan database, his name is additionally recorded with a distortion. The surname and the spelling diverge between sources, and working out where a copyist erred and where there is a genuine discrepancy is no longer possible. So, a disappearance becomes a muddle in the paperwork as well. For the people waiting for him at home, this is the worst of all possible outcomes. There is a date, there is a mountain, there is a line in a report, and there is no place, nowhere to come to, nothing to bury, nothing to close. A man went off to lead a scientific expedition and did not come back, and all that is left of him is a jacket and some equipment on the snow. The fate of the second doctor will come to light exactly 2 weeks later, and it will be brought to light by a man who at that moment does not even know the missing men exist. Let us go back to the slope, to what stayed invisible to everyone who walked down. A bivouac sack is the simplest thing in high-altitude equipment. A thin synthetic shell that a person climbs into entirely when there is no tent or no way to reach one. It does not warm you. All it does is stop the wind and hold in the heat you produce yourself. As long as you can shiver, move, eat, the sack works. The moment your reserve runs out, the shell is just a shell. At around 7,800 meters, that reserve drains fast. The body here spends more than it takes in under any circumstances. Even lying motionless in a sack runs a deficit. It does not recover, not even in sleep. And with every hour, the ability to judge a situation soberly and make decisions grows weaker. Decisions get postponed until later, and later never comes. That is exactly how the path of Norbert Wolf ends. He stops on the slope and climbs into the sack, not because he has decided to spend a comfortable night, but because going on is no longer possible. The climbing club reports put the outcome in a single word: froze. No fall, no avalanche, no accident on rock. A 30-year-old doctor who knew more about high-altitude physiology than most stops in a place where stopping means the end. He lies down in his sack in the upper part of a route that others will follow in that very same season. And this is one of the hard peculiarities of Gasherbrum too. Those who die here rarely vanish into crevasses or under avalanches. More often they stay on the route itself, where they are seen by whoever comes up next. That same season, a man whose name the whole world knows arrives beneath these same slopes. Reinhold Messner is 37. He has already climbed Everest alone and without oxygen, and for 1982, he has set himself a task no one before him had solved: 3 8,000ers in a single year. He carries out the plan in pieces. In May, Kangchenjunga, the third highest summit on the planet, in Nepal. Then a transfer halfway across a continent to Pakistan, to the Karakoram, where the season is entirely different and the weather that year is foul. Here his objectives stand side by side. First, Gasherbrum 2, then Broad Peak. He goes at Gasherbrum 2 in alpine style. With him are 2 Pakistanis, Nazir Sabir and Major Sher Khan. For Pakistan, this climb will become a page of national history. For Messner, another step in his tally of 8,000ers. On the 24th of July, 1982, the 3 of them reach the summit by the southwest ridge, by the very same classic line the German expedition had chosen 2 weeks earlier. There is simply no other sensible route here. Everyone walks the same thread, which means they inevitably pass through the altitudes where the trail of the 2 doctors broke off, through the stretch where Brunner and Wolf were last seen alive, through 7,800. And somewhere around that mark, the 3 of them notice a bivouac sack in the snow and a man inside it. He froze here, in the place where death caught up with him. It is Norbert Wolf, the Austrian doctor, who went missing on this mountain 2 weeks earlier. The American Alpine Club report will later record the discovery dryly, almost as a formality. Dr. Wolf was found at 25,600 feet by Reinhold Messner and his companions, frozen in his bivouac sack. 25,600 feet is about 7,800 meters. One important detail follows from that figure. The place where he was found is higher than the point where the 2 men were last seen alive. So, Wolf had managed to climb roughly another 120 meters of height, and there he stopped. He was going upward to the very last. This discovery closes the question of one of the 2 missing men. The answer arrives on no one's plan. The body was found not by searchers, not by relatives, not by a rescue party, but by outsiders who were climbing on business of their own. The second doctor they do not encounter. Brunner is still nowhere. They cannot bring the dead man down, and this is not a matter of willingness. The 3 are moving in alpine style, traveling light, with no spare rope, no support team, no oxygen. The weight of a human body at 7,800 meters is a quantity you do not argue with. An attempt to drag it downward almost certainly means death for the people doing the dragging. Everyone in the mountains knows this, and so the decision is made quickly. They pass by, they climb to the summit, descend to camp, and leave the mountain. Behind them, higher up the ridge, a man stays lying in his sack, a man who was found and could not be taken away. Going down does not mean rest. Straight after Gasherbrum 2, the 3 of them strike camp and move across to Broad Peak, the neighboring 8,000er, a stone's throw from their base. On the 2nd of August, 1982, Messner stands on that summit too. For him, it is the 11th 8,000er on his personal list. A little over a week passes between the 2 summits. For that era, it is a speed record. No one before had taken 2 8,000ers back-to-back, that fast, and in that style. Together with Kangchenjunga in May, the season adds up to the thing the whole plan was built for: 3 8,000ers in 1 year, the first result of its kind in history. He will later write a book about that year. And this is where something else gets mixed in with the fame. In the climbing world, people begin to say that Messner walks his mountains over the dead, that the records get counted and the people on the route do not. The reproach sounds crude and not entirely fair. Bringing a body down from 7,800 meters in alpine style is physically impossible, and the accusers know it. But the accusation is not about physics. It is about how it looks from the outside when a man walks past and carries on counting summits. The argument about what is and is not permissible at 8,000 meters will drag on in the community for decades and will never be settled. Some say you can no longer help the dead, and you cannot afford to lose the living. Others say a mountain should not turn into a road that people march along without looking back. Messner hears that reproach and remembers it. Outwardly, he does not defend himself and does not argue. But 2 years later, he will come back to the same mountain and do something nobody demanded of him. Yes, the summer of 1984. Messner returns to the Gasherbrums, this time with the young South Tyrolean Hans Kammerlander, to link both 8,000ers in a single traverse without dropping back to camp. The route begins where it always does, on the ridge of Gasherbrum II. And on the way up, the two of them come out to the thing Messner has already seen. The body in the bivouac sack lies where it lay before. In 2 years, the altitude and the cold have changed almost nothing here. This time, he stops. By his own account, the request came from the dead man's family. They wanted him to be buried. Messner carries out that request, not by bringing him down, which is impossible, but by burial on the mountain itself. The price of the decision is clear to both of them at once. A burial at that altitude takes hours and strength, and they have exactly as much of both as the traverse requires, and not a gram more. Every hour spent here lowers their chances of reaching the second summit. They take it on knowing the arithmetic. The two of them find a glacier crevasse and bury Norbert Wolf in it, then close it over. All of this happens on the crossing between Gasherbrum I and Gasherbrum II, on that very stretch which ties the two summits into a single route. Austrian and German sources describe what happened in a single formulation. Messner found the body of the missing Austrian climber, and 2 years later, buried him during the crossing from one Gasherbrum to the other. Think about where that grave ended up. Two mountains, 8,080 meters and 8,035 meters, stand so tightly side by side that a single shared base camp serves them both. Everyone who comes here lives at one point and then splits off toward two summits, and precisely between them, in the ice of the saddle, lies a man who reached neither. Having buried him, the two of them go on. They come out onto the ridge, spend a night in a snowstorm at 7,400, lose time, but do not turn back. At the end of June 1984, Messner and Kammerlander climb to the summit of Gasherbrum I and go down, worn out, at the edge of their strength, across a glacier cut through with crevasses. Messner would later admit that not falling into one of them on that descent was pure luck. Their return is filmed by Werner Herzog. The film will come out under the title Gasherbrum, der leuchtende Berg, Gasherbrum, the shining mountain. And it will have everything in it: the approach, the camp, the conversations, the exhausted faces on the way down. The only thing it will not have is that scene on the saddle, and Gerd Brunner is still out there somewhere on the same slope. One of the two doctors was found and buried between two mountains. The second was never found at all.